Welcome everyone to the next day of our 2022 National Coding Symposium. We're glad you're all getting in and joining us. If you are an educator who is looking for an ACVREP certificate, our opening code today is evidence. EVIDENCE, evidence. We are glad to have you join us. This is day 3. Recordings for day 1 and 2 will be posted in hopefully the next 2 weeks or so, so stay tuned. You can always catch those, but hopefully you will be able to join us also for the next 2 days of this week. Each day is different people, different topics, great conversation. I am starting to see the numbers coming into our virtual doors slow down. So I am going to turn it over to Paul Schrader to introduce our keynote speaker. Paul?
Thank you so much, Leanne. This is Paul Schrader. I'm the Vice President for Impact and Outreach at the American Printing House for the Blind. Been at APH for about 1.5 years. Spent most of my career at the American Foundation for the Blind, so I know some of you probably from there. And I do want to say I'm so proud that Leanne and Jeff and Leslie and Scott and Amy are the outreach part of outreach for Impact and Outreach. So we are delighted that I get to join with them. It's my pleasure today to be a part of introducing our keynote. Now, I know nothing about coding. I was one of those people that ignored programming. And of course, you know, I'm old enough that it's back to punch cards or whatever. But it was not something I followed. However, I've spent a good portion of my career working around the technology policy world and pushing for policies to be made more accessible, companies to do more on accessibility for people with disabilities. So I have a lot of respect for the work that goes into programming and the work of those who are in this vineyard. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce Andreas, Andy, Stefik. I guess he goes by all 3 names, so you can choose which way you want to address him. He's an associate professor of computer science at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. Yes, there is stuff in Las Vegas that is academic and not necessarily tied to gambling. We can ask him later if he's got some tips, though, on that. He's best known, I think, in our world for his work on Quorum, what is described as an evidence-based programming language. A labor of love, as I understand it, that he worked on with his wife for part of the time to get it going. Developed to address the challenges of visual programming and complex syntax, but immensely popular, of course, among educators and students who are blind or who have learning disabilities. Fully featured, scalable language, and I know one that is hugely popular among folks who do handle and hang out in the computer programming world. He's been recognized by the White House as a champion of change and by code.org and the Association of Computer Science Teachers for his work in this area. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Andreas Andy Stefik from UNLV to the Coding Symposium. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Paul. That was exceedingly kind, to say the least. I'm going to go ahead and share screen really quick, and I will keep the captions on and share sound. And if someone on the APH side would mind either orally telling me that it works or telling me it doesn't, that'd be great if that's okay. Oops, there we go. And then, does that look correctly for those that can see it?
You're correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, like Paul said, I'm a professor of computer science in Vegas. And if you need to get in touch with me, you're welcome to email me, or although I very rarely use Twitter, my handle is at Andreas Stefik. So you're welcome to get in touch with me there as well. So if you don't know me at all, I'm a computer scientist. I invent programming languages, tools, libraries around them, all sorts of accessibility stuff. I study how humans invent things. That's sort of one of the things that I study in terms of evidence practices. Quorum was actually invented by my wife and I, and then we worked with the National Science Foundation for a number of years together, building out the first few versions. which were all terrible, in part because it turns out that making things accessible for complex problems is really hard. And so it's taken us a very long time to get to where Quorum is at today. So I'm actually proud that my wife and I invented it together. It's a lot of fun. On the screen, I often orally describe my talks just because I've spent so much time, even though I'm not blind myself, I've spent so much time over the years in the BVI community that I often orally describe. So if you're not familiar with that, I'm sure many people at this conference are. On the screen is me and my daughter. She was 2 at the time.
I moved the table forward to try to get away from the green screen.
Okay.
Oh, sorry if there's some kind of sound. My daughter is very small and she has her tongue sticking out. It's quite adorable. And my tongue is also sticking out, but I'm much less adorable. So I want to give a couple quick brief caveats. So this talk is going to not only be, but it's going to partially be about evidence. And I want to be very clear about something. Evidence is not magic, right? Evidence does not mean for all possible things. It means that we have hints at a direction. That's science, right? Like, you often don't solve all the problems that can be solved in astronomy overnight. And I hate to say it, but you're not going to solve all the problems in accessibility overnight either. That will take decades or centuries for us to get right as a society, not even just one person. But so I'm going to be talking about how people invent things to an extent, and that always implies context. Humans invent in a context, programming languages are part of that, but not fully. People are different across all sorts of different parameters. Big, small, old, young, blind, not, other disabilities. There's all sorts of complexity to this problem, right? And so if you look at coding, if you look at coding broadly, oftentimes where coding started is you might have just a terminal, and there's a terminal on the screen. And a terminal is, I like type commands in, and then I press enter or something, and then it'll execute some command. And I might do that in a text editor. And that might sound super primitive and like, hey, Stefik, thanks for telling me about the 80s. But actually, these kinds of environments are incredibly sophisticated. Making a text editor that not only is sufficiently featured to do stuff, but also is accessible is actually a very complex problem. But nowadays, for things like different kinds of domains, programming, Microsoft Word for just memos and things, data science, stuff like that. Environments for writing computer programs have really changed, especially in the last, since the early 90s. Largely, I think, in part just because computing power has gotten more powerful. And as such, it's been easier to put in features that are kind of hyper visual and do things like that. So on the screen here is a picture of Quorum Studio, which I'll get to later, but in this particular picture, it looks just like a normal text editor. Oh, I guess if you're not familiar with Quorum Studio, this is a version that you can't actually download. It looks all dark because we've added in all sorts of color contrast modes and stuff like that just for giggles this release. Well, for other reasons. Besides that, if you have certain other domains, like let's say computer gaming, on the screen now is a picture of Unity 3D. Now, obviously, Unity 3D, well, actually, maybe it's not obvious. Unity 3D is a game programming environment, and it's not accessible, but it's insanely powerful, right? Like there's property windows on the side that let you adjust where things are in 3 space, which you need to have a little bit of knowledge of linear algebra to even work with. There's information for materials and lighting and probes and all sorts of extra stuff, not alien probes, normal probes. But so, it has information for scenes and cameras, all sorts of stuff. And you might think, hey, that's just inherently not going to work for accessibility, but that's actually not true. Oftentimes, when you have environments that are not accessible, it's a choice. Sometimes it's a research problem too, and there's a lot of complexity there, but I'm just saying. Now, besides that, there's also, as I think there's probably quite a few school teachers that came this year. I think there was last year. Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the screen now is I'm getting a thumbs up, is a environment that looks like a block environment. Basically, the idea is there's little shapes and you drag and drop them across the screen, and that's how you code. Now, we'll get into some of the evidence on these particular issues in a bit, but those being accessible or not is not a fundamental fact of programming. It's a choice. the developers have chosen not to make those accessible by not adding in the appropriate hooks to make them accessible, right? And this is tricky because young kids need to program too. So in 2008 or so, I was seeing a lot of this while I was in graduate school at the time. These sort of hypervisual languages get built. And I thought to myself, well, number one, those are really cool. I bet they actually do have a benefit for young kids. They're more interesting than playing with a terminal. They have like all sorts of neat applications for gaming and stuff like that. And there are some problems inside of things like computer gaming that are just inherently difficult to code. I mean, I'm not going to lie, Unity 3D and environments like that came about, not because they wanted to discriminate, but because game programming is actually genuinely hard. Writing all of your game in linear algebra is not simple. And so being able to drag and drop stuff was much easier for people that can see it, right? But here's the catch. The problem was I was also, for whatever reason at the time, I won't get into the details, I was collaborating with people that were blind. And when I watched, especially at the Washington State School for the Blind, which is where a lot of this started, I would sit in a room and I would sit there and I'd watch blind kids code. And the barriers were just immense. It's not like you can't do it, right? You can pull up any programming language and it has text and you can read it in a screen reader, but it's hard. I mean, it's difficult to hear phrases like for left paren, int I equals 0 semicolon, I less than 10 semicolon, I plus plus right paren left brace, and not just go, holy crap, why is the code even that way, right? It just doesn't make sense. But here's the thing. I kept thinking in my head, what are the barriers to human factors broadly across all people? Is it just the blind community that was forgotten, or is it everybody? Which things have been studied and which things have been not? And what is the evidence? And in addition, I know now, although I didn't know it at the time, when you pay professional programmers, it turns out it's very expensive. I imagine any administrators in the room realize that when they build a website and they have to pay a programmer to do that, that's not cheap, right? That costs actual money. You have to pay salaries and they're quite high for programmers. So across the United States alone per year, turns out that's about $331.7 billion. That's a lot of money that we pay computer programmers. So you might think, well, $330.1 billion problem. They must have just forgotten the blind community, right? That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. But no, it turns out that there's this study by Antti Kajanaho. Yes, I did have to practice his name. And the Antti Juhani study was basically a big guffaw in the academic world. And the reason is because what Antti Juhani found, there's a chart on the screen that shows the specific years academic papers were published. The details of it don't matter, but the big picture is when programming started in like the 50s or so, it wasn't until 1976 that we got a first study that used evidence. And I want to say that again, a study that used evidence, right? That wasn't pseudoscience, that wasn't BS, that wasn't somebody saying, I think Python is better, or whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. Like the point was, it took years before that happened. And between that and 2012, there was only 22 experiments. Now think about that. All those papers went through peer review. Right? Supposedly, scientists looked at them and they said, this is scientific, but it turns out that was not true. They were not scientific. They did not have evidence associated with their facts. And this wasn't just for people that were blind or visually impaired. This was for everybody. That $331.7 billion problem all of a sudden is on the table because there was an entire generation that just completely missed the point in scholarship. And it wasn't just programming languages. It turns out in computer science, there's this other paper by Amy Coe, Thomas Sotoza, and Margaret Burnett that found in the area of software engineering, the evidence standards were so bad that oftentimes most scholars would just test themselves. Think about if a vaccine manufacturer did that. Well, I designed a vaccine, I tried it myself, and it worked great, I promise. Nobody would take it seriously. But in programming languages, that is actually the state of the practice, and it's been starting to change. This is why when I talk about Quorum, it's an evidence-based language because we're trying to change that. Okay, so then the question was, by 2008 or so, we were like, okay, if these people are not gathering data, who is? And how do you sort of change that culture? What do you do? Well, it turns out other communities have gone through this. So on the screen now is an example from the early 1700s that used evidence practices very similar to the programming language community today, 1700s, I'm not joking. And there was an epidemic in Boston, that's a smallpox epidemic. I'm sure none of us have experience with pandemics. And there were two scholars that were kind of arguing about this idea of like cutting you open and giving you smallpox. Obviously, this is horrible. And if you read this story more carefully, you'll actually quickly learn that everything about this story is horrible. Cotton Mather was a horrible person involved in the Salem witch trials. He stole his ideas from his literal slave. I mean, these are not good people, but that's not really the point. The point was they made claims, like William Douglas said, that that was a wicked and criminal practice. Cotton Mather basically gave positions of authority, neither of which were true, and there was really no evidence. There was kind of later, but in any case, if someone says today, programming language X, including me, by the way, programming language X is good or bad, is that good enough? The answer should be no. Subjective claims just are not good enough. But by the 1830s or so, about 100 years later, there were experiments that were starting to come out, like the idea of experimentation in science was starting to come about. On the screen is this fellow named Frederick Wilhelm von Hoven, who was a scathing writer against the practice of homeopathy at the time. He wrote these letters, there was these trials, it's complicated, and they added very basic things into what's called the Nuremberg salt test. These things were things like a control group. Like in programming languages, that would be, I tested Python versus C++ at the same time, and I saw who won in a study, whatever it is, right? Really basic, and other things as well. But one of the really key innovations is from this guy named Austin Bradford Hill. Now, if you've never heard of Austin Bradford Hill, you actually have, because he's the guy that figured out that smoking causes cancer, right? And I want to be very careful in my words here. I did not say smoking is correlated with cancer, because every statistics textbook, people have this misnomer that, you know, correlation is not causation, which of course is true. However, typically textbooks have a second sentence after that says, but the lack of correlation is often evidence against causation, right? And so what Bradford Hill figured out was that you could control some things in medical studies, and then you could track a ton of others that were kind of these extraneous variables. So he would use like epidemiological, which is field and lab data, statistics, multivariate models, rich and varied experimental designs, quantitative data, qualitative data. He standardized procedures and had just a ton of other checks and balances. Bradford Hill's work is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, nor am I pretending it is, but he basically invented what is called the randomized controlled trial, an important innovation in science, so influential that you can derive equations in the medical field, specifically R of t is 2750 times the exponent of 0.112 t minus 1964. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you basically see an exponential curve going up, showing the number of experiments that use checks and balances. And why is that? Because it makes sense. It makes sense to check our assumptions with facts, right? Okay, now at this point in the talk, you're probably thinking, what on earth is he blabbing about? He's talking about like old medical studies. This is very confusing. I thought this was about Quorum. It is, I promise. Okay, so what we did on Quorum is we had this idea and we thought, well, let's just do what the medical people did. Let's just run some experiments. So one of the ones that's probably the more well-known, we ran this experiment on syntax. And I just thought, boy, it's sure absurd that you have for left paren, int I equals 0 semicolon, blah, blah, blah. That sure seems weird. What if we just made it something really simple? So we did some surveys and we asked people what words should it be in a programming language? And we found all sorts of weird stuff. For example, in these surveys, we found that the 3 best choices for the concept of looping were words like repeat in a survey, right? Not proof. But then we found the 3 worst, and I promise you this is actually true. We even replicated this at a different sample for a different study and published that one too, were for, while, and for each, in that order, which are the most common words for looping in programming, right? So literally, there's just no thought into it at all. So then we thought, well, but let's just put this up against a placebo. So we made a programming language where, I swear this is true, my graduate student at the time, Susanna, her name was Siebert at the time, she's since changed, sat around and basically rolled dice, made a programming language based on random symbols. We just randomly chose them. Didn't even matter what they were, like a slash for something, a a weird symbol here, a weird symbol there. And it turns out many programming languages have syntax so bad for novices that you can roll dice and it's just as good as Java and Perl. And I want to be clear, the reason it happens, and you can kind of see this on the slide, there's these little red outlines of stuff and things like that. The details don't really matter, but you can statistically predict which tokens cause it. Turns out it's C-style syntax. It turns out the kinds of things that were adopted across Python, across Java, across Perl, across all these languages appeared to be causing the problem in terms of intuition. And it makes sense why. The word for, F-O-R, means nothing. The word repeat has a natural meaning. And as such, you can understand what it's trying to say, at least better. It's not magic again. But okay, so that was years ago. That was like 2008. And we've been really busy since then because it turns out like the National Science Foundation was like, hey, they're using evidence. What do you mean there's this big problem? Well, that's sure disturbing. So we've been very lucky on Quorum that the National Science Foundation has funded us for a long time now. And so we found all sorts of weird things. For example, last year we discovered that when people write Quorum, people have been sending stuff to our website for years and years. Well, it turns out if you go in and anonymously just look at the kinds of errors that people have, they follow an exponential curve. Why do they follow an exponential curve? I don't know, but they do. And what's really interesting about that is it means that you can look at the most common errors that people have, and you can take advantage of that in the compiler. So what we did for Quorum 9, which was last year, we rolled out for the first time a version where we looked at all like the biggest errors that people had. We rewrote all the messages that they got to try to make them easier to understand. It took me 6 months to write that technology. It was actually much more complicated than I thought, but it's not the point. The point is that you can use evidence to try to make good guesses as to what would help people. And since these follow an exponential curve, it made sense. So besides that, our most current work on Quorum is actually doing data science work, in part because we noticed that in terms of people that are blind, it's grossly inaccessible across the major languages, across Python and R and MATLAB and stuff like that. And so one of the initial studies we did, we found that it's actually so bad, not just for people that are blind, it's so bad that even if you have 2 years of training in C++, it actually doesn't really help you learn R. And the reason is because R often uses weird phrases. And I'll show you a couple in a second. You can decide for yourself whether they make sense. Here we go. I'm going to read it out loud because this, you just got to hear. Like oftentimes in our work, I've been inspired so much by the blind community, in part because I just go and I code in screen readers. And the moment you hear it in a screen reader, it's just obvious whether or not it's easy to understand. So let me just read this. And I just want you to decide, what does this code do? All right, that's big picture. What does this code do? Okay, so it says pound input, library left paren, lock5, data right paren, data left paren, quote, sandwich ants, quote, right paren, M1 greater than dash AOV left paren, ants tilde, filling, comma, data equals sandwich ants, right paren, summary left paren, M1 right paren, pound output, pound greater than df sum skew, mean skew, f value, PR greater than, left paren greater than f right paren, pound greater than filling 1561 780.5 5.627 0.011 star, pound greater than residuals 21 29 13 138.7, and then some other stuff. Now I'm not doing that just to be facetious. When I have one of the grants that I work on has this really amazing scholar named Nick Giudici, who lives in Maine. He's a neuropsychologist and he's blind. He studies tactile perception. Amazing guy, just by any stretch, brilliant dude. And when he does his statistics, this is what he gets. And we were just talking about it. We're like, why? And all the charts and graphs, yeah, none of that's accessible, right? So like, of course, when we're pushing data science into high school, you can ask, well, is all this stuff accessible? It's required by law to be, but of course it's not, right? Nobody bothered to make it accessible. So, and it's not just this. If we want everything to be accessible across all of the field of computer science, we need to look at everything. So we've done studies on graphics chips and found that a lot of the designs that are used by NVIDIA, sorry, really don't make a ton of sense. You can look at things like databases. Quorum has a new database library, which we actually don't have documentation up for yet, but it exists and it works. And it turns out the common thing that people do for database programming is actually called polyglot. It means you have a programming language, and then I swear this is true, you embed another programming language in your programming language, just because we're all masochists as computer scientists, I think. But it turns out, if you control that polyglot in a really funny way, and I won't go into the details, there's some charts on the screen, but they don't matter. These slides are accessible. I'll send them to the committee so they can do what they want with them. But it turns out, if you adjust it just right, and one of my students did his whole dissertation on this topic to try to figure it out, and you run it with very controlled studies, you can tweak the polyglot so it's not so bad. It's actually a little bit easier for novices, and it's just as easy for professionals. So we always look for these kind of sweet spots where we can help kids, but not hurt the pros in the process. That's kind of the sweet spot that we like to have if we can. Okay, now the last thing I'll mention before I do something maybe people are more interested in is blocks. So one of the things that I've heard in relation to Quorum and et cetera is, well, what about blocks? Like a lot of kids use these things and they're clearly very popular amongst individuals. Does that actually help? And the answer is yes. The evidence is actually positive in terms of blocks. And there's this good data from this guy named David Weintraub. Now, the effect size is pretty small. In statistical terms, they call this a Cohen's d. It means the number of standard deviations above something. The details don't matter, but the point is it's about 0.4, very small. However, it's not zero. And a lot of the other statistical effects we find, they're not zero either. So why wouldn't you do something that helps? So we are building a block mode for Quorum accessibly. That matters to me a great deal, but you have to kind of balance that. You can do it accessibly and it does help, but you have to get the design kind of just right. Okay, so that's kind of the heart of what we do. Like Quorum is, like you might have thought I'm just gonna be talking about like, how do you write a code and stuff like that, but that's not really the point. The point is that in programming, there's this been long-standing problem of not using evidence in the computer science field. And it sucks that that's true, but it is true. And so on Quorum, what we've really done is, number one, getting it accessible is deep in my soul, if you want to say that. And part of that is looking at evidence across a great many people, not just people that are blind, but all sorts of people. It's not like kids have it easy with programming. And even professionals have lots of challenges as well. So looking at across the greatest groups possible, I think makes sense. And so there's lots of details, like we should deprecate C-style syntax, and there's other stuff in the slides as well if you want to look at the details. Okay, so last thing, one request that I had when I was preparing for this keynote is don't just talk about evidence only. So I'm going to take a very brief switch over to Quorum Studio. I'm going to show you just a couple of things that you can do very briefly that we've been trying to make accessible. So I'm going to pull this up, and this is Quorum Studio. I think it's 3.8, which is literally an arbitrary number I typed on top of it. But it's whatever test version I have in my system. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip on NVDA really quick, just so you can kind of get a sense of the types of things you can do when you're trying hard to make stuff accessible. Okay, now I will say too, Quorum and Quorum Studio is, again, it's not magic. Some of the problems that we're trying to tackle to make accessible are really difficult. For example, one of the things that I'm going to do first, I'm going to show you how to make a 3D game that's accessible, and it's blind accessible, right? So here we go. Oops.
Type here to search. Expanded. New project temp. Expanded. 3D scene. This project creates a default scene and game file designed for.
So I'm going to make a 3D scene in Quorum Studio.
New name edit 3D scene app. Oh.
I'm going to name it Yo APH because that's the best name that I could.
OK button.
Okay, I'm going to make this
code tabs tab Yo APH project loaded.
Program. I'm going to go to it.
Collapsed. Yo expand scenes expand.
I'm using the keyboard, of course, and I'm going to go to this
level
scene.
3 scene dot code tabs tab control.
When it pulls up, right on the screen right now, you see a 3D grid. I mean, sorry, a 2D grid. This is because there's 2D and 3D modes for it. If I go back,
projects tree view, scene items, scene palette tree view.
I can actually go into 3D mode.
Space 3 expand.
And I can go, and I'm going kind of quickly.
Ship level 3 angled winged ship 1 of 9.
I can go in and I can make items that are 2D or 3D.
Angled winged ship, an orange and gray speeder ship with 2 wings on the sides and flat engines on the back. This version has an angled cockpit and angled engines.
Yes, it did take me a week to hand code all of those 3D models so that they were actually, yes, but anyway.
Placed angled winged ship 1.
So what I've done is I've put a ship on the screen. I can go
Scene
back.
rocks
I've now got
5
some
small
rocks.
angled winged ship 200 300. Placed 5 small brown rocks. 5 small brown rocks 1.
Now you can see that there's probably a lot of room for improvement in something like Quorum. You've got a way that you can do 3D environments, but it's not like we have good evidence on what all the words should be. Like, should we change the priority of the sounds that come out? Should we use sonification to provide you some kind of clues? How do we manage the camera? I mean, there's all sorts of complexity with this kind of stuff. But nonetheless, you can do 3D game programming and it works in NVDA or JAWS off the cuff. That's a good start.
Scene palette tree
real quick.
project.
And I'll show you one more thing and then I'll
Level
I'll
3
call it
bar.
the end. If I have another application where we're talking about data science, to me, it's not really good enough to just complain about what's in data science. Instead, we're also trying to make it easier for the kids to actually do it and make it accessible. So this is coming out, I think like a month from now. It's not quite out yet. And so you can make an application where you can do all sorts of charts.
Build successful in 0.13 seconds.
Which you can't see. Sorry, 1 second. Let me share that.
Game window. Select. Sharing up.
Meeting controls with participants can now see your application alert. Meeting control.
I have a chart on the screen that has a bunch of bars on it and stuff like that. And when we generate a chart in Quorum, it doesn't just generate the images. It generates accessibility information, which it's sending back and forth to the operating system. That's how the 3D engine works as well. It's like a dirty trick. It's like saying, hey, that 3D spinning dragon eating that gnome is actually a button operating system. I promise. And we lie to it. And then it says, okay, I'll tell NVDA. And then NVDA is like, cool, a button. I can click that. So you get the idea. But so it's similar with the charts. Oh, if I have the focus.
Quorum Studio.
There we go.
Game window. Cost, in USD dollar, axis ranges from 0 to 300. Chart area with 84 bars. Australia group, one of 12 groups, has 7 bars. 2 long drinks bar, 28.3, one of 7 bars inside Australia group.
Now, okay, so you might be thinking too, hey, well, what are all the keys? How do I interact with it and all sorts of stuff? And some of this we're still kind of playing with in the lab, doing usability studies, showing it to people, trying to get different points of view, figuring out how you use it tactily, how you use it with screen readers, how it varies across different kinds of screen readers. All those things are still kind of in progress. But nonetheless,
from Mandy Van Cleve to all panel.
Nonetheless, the idea is that we're trying to get it to the point where any kid can do computer science across as many disciplines as possible: data science, 3D game programming, 2D game programming, network programming, JSON stuff, whatever it is that you need. And that's really what we're trying to do on Quorum, in addition to this whole evidence thing. And that is my talk. Thank you again to APH for inviting me, and I hope some of you found it interesting.
Andy, that was fantastic. Truly incredible. The history is such
Note of NVDA.
Wonderful.
Exit NV. Okay, but
I think that this keynote will be used again and again by teachers who can give a little bit of perspective and history to the students that they teach. I know that our students are going to take this leadership from you someday, right? And they're going to be writing the next accessible codes. And you had a quote in there at one point. You said, the sweet spot is so we can help kids, but not hurt the pros in the community, or something like that. I think when we're honest with ourselves, we know that accessibility is a long way away from being built in and inherent without slowing down progress. And to know that you are working on a language that not only is taking that to heart with care, but is also setting up foundational elements for other coders and code writing languages to start to be able to allow the pros of the community, should we say, to use their visual enhancements and visual crutches to make code language is incredible. Just so appreciate the work you're doing in their accessibility community.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I also, I mean, I really think that's the way forward. Like, it's very tempting to just say, you know, we should make this alternative tool or something and have it be accessible. I just don't think it's going to work. I think what you really got to do, exactly what you're saying, is you need to, if you just make it so that the foundational technologies have accessibility just like as part of their built-in nature, then over time, I mean, think about this. Imagine that the blind and visually impaired community over the next 30 years trains 10,000 students. I mean, that's a lot, but that can all program. Think about what the next generation will have that this one doesn't, right? You know, I mean, like, we're making all these decisions about what goes in a 3D environment and stuff like that. That's all well and good. But the cold hard reality is that we're not going to do as good of a job as 200 blind children that know deeply from lived experience how to make this exactly perfect for themselves. We won't be able to beat that. But the next generation can if we train enough kids. And that matters. Like, they can make a huge difference, you know?
So getting goosebumps over here. We have some of those kids in our audience right now. Some of the kids listening today are that future. For some of you in our audience who are also looking for a little bit of insight into Quorum itself, we are about to turn that page right now. Andy is going to now moderate our next panel, which is understanding coding concepts within Quorum. And so I'll let Andy introduce some of our panel members. But this next 50 minutes is going to be talking about the Quorum language itself and its impact and how to go about learning it and its application.
Awesome, great. Well, I happen to know all three of them. Oh, there's Jill, amazing. So I'm gonna, Scott needs to be up on the stage, or whatever they call it in Zoom as well. Sorry, Scott.
No problem. I was working on finding him.
Oh, no, it's all good. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing three people, and I'm going to do it just in order. I'll start with William Allee, because I know him probably the best because I work with him every day. William is actually the lead developer on Quorum and has been for the last 6 years or so. I'm very sorry, William. And William Allee, he wanted me to say he's the senior developer on the Quorum team. He joined the lab after completing a bachelor's degree in computer science at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2014. He's since spent the last 7.5 years working on, wow, 7.5?
Longer than you thought, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. 7.5 years working on Quorum, especially on the accessible game engine and user interface, along with Quorum Studio and an accessible computer science principles curriculum. And thank you, William. I also have one from Scott, and Scott says, Scott Jaffray received his master's degree in orientation mobility from California State University, Los Angeles, and has served children and adults with visual impairment since 2010. He currently works at the California School for the Blind as an assistive technology specialist, and previously worked at the Western Blind Rehabilitation Center in Palo Alto, California as an O&M specialist, computer access technology specialist, and computer access technology supervisor. Thank you, Scott. And Jill Dunaway, who I have actually known for a long time. I don't have a bio for Jill, but I do know that unless you sent it to me very, very recently, I have known Jill.
Yesterday.
You did?
I did.
Oh, well, I apologize. Well, it's somewhere hidden in my evil.
It's okay.
Evil email box, but I've known Jill for must have been like 10 years now. Jill is a teacher at the Alabama School for the Blind. And if there's anything else you want to add, Jill, I apologize.
I'm actually now with the Center for Assistive Technology Training. We are a federally funded partnership between Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind and the American Printing House for the Blind. So we provide training on a wide range of assistive technology devices. Before I joined the CATT team, I taught assistive technology at the Alabama School for the Blind for 15 years. I am a certified TVI. I'm certified in JAWS, NVDA, and Zoom Text. And I have the two most adorable teenage nephews on the planet, Jacob and Joshua. I love being Aunt Jill.
I love it. Thank you very much, Jill. It looks like I never got it. So my email.
That's okay.
Anyway, I apologize. Okay, well, so I think that the purpose of this panel is really to talk about sort of like coding stuff related to Quorum. And so William's sort of the odd man out, I think. But why don't we start with the folks that have done teaching? So maybe we'll start with you, Jill. One of the questions was, when you're in the classroom, oftentimes you have kids, and the technologies have not been perfect over the years. And you know this better than anybody. I mean, especially back in the days when we used to use NetBeans and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, yes.
It's a different planet. So can you sort of tell me the challenges you've kind of had over the years and anything you've done to kind of get past them?
One of the well, it all depends on your students, but I have had students that are very hesitant with coding, and that they feel like this isn't something they can do. They're very hesitant to even try. One of the first groups that I worked with Quorum at the School for the Blind, for example, I had a particular young lady who was extremely hesitant, and that in the beginning, if something would not compile and there was an error, she would just pretty much throw her hands up and say, well, it doesn't work. And I would say, well, let's look at your codes. Let's see if we can find the problem. Even though they may be a good screen reader user, the process of listening to what you're hearing is pretty different, in my opinion, when you're looking at code. They need to be aware of syntax and, did I not close the parentheses? Did I need a comma here? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And by the end of the semester, that young lady, I was so proud in our semester exam wrap up, she was the one chiming in and answering questions. And so I just love to see that. That's
great. It's interesting too, like when we first started investigating some of the syntax issues that blind and visually impaired kids had, this issue that you mentioned of like closing braces and stuff like that always would come up because it's clearly an issue. Turns out in later studies by a number of scholars, it turns out sighted kids have the same problem for the same reason. And I actually find that sometimes I find that really surprising that like, you might think it's just a screen reader issue. No, it seems to be something inherent to programming that's difficult for children. And blind individuals are not exempt from the reality of science, but it's fascinating hearing everybody talk about it. Because like, I think the blind community was kind of left out for a long time, but in reality, a lot of the things that we're all trying to do for kids that cannot see, it actually helps everybody. And we didn't even know, and to me, that's fascinating. But anyway, thank you, Jill. That's a great answer. Scott, so you are an assistive tech guy, and so I think you've described yourself as not really a coder, but you kind of do it. Is that accurate? And then how do you approach?
I code what I need to code, and it's mostly HTML. I do my website and I figure out the things that I need to figure out. Unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of a CS background. So, I mean, much like Jill, it's getting the kids to understand that this isn't as bad as it seems. It sounds very complicated, and it is complicated, right? But just yesterday, so what we're doing outreach, where we're going out to, you might have, if anybody saw the presentation that Vanessa was giving yesterday, we do outreach Oakland, LA, where we partner with a school and go down and do a coding experimentation, right? An experience. And then we also do it on campus. So this week we're having a coding week. So after luckily on the West Coast, we're done at 12. So after lunch, we have a whole afternoon of classes coming in, individual students. And I'm hearing, wow, that wasn't that bad, right? It's not. So if we get to these kids and we give them this experience, we can maybe catch one. We're looking for the musicians, right? We have a music teacher, and we're looking for people that can do that. Well, we need to do that with coding too, because you can have a job making apps. You can have a job creating tools for yourself. And that's really, for me, the biggest thing is if I have a problem, if I have something I need to fix it yourself, because it's probably going to help somebody else as well.
Yeah, that's true. And those jobs not only pay well, which they do pay well, but also too, like you said, you can go in and you can kind of invent the next generation, which makes it that much easier for the next kid, you know?
Right. So the more kids we get to, the more students that experience this, you never know, right? You don't know that child who's over there who's quiet or, you know, doesn't really say anything. All of a sudden you give them something and it's like, whoa, I like that. That's not as hard as the thing. So the students that yesterday were saying that, it's like, well, okay, let's follow up and, you know, let's see where we can go with this.
You know, it's funny too, because like programming can be challenging, but it's also like, you know, a lot of things are, you know, it's not like it's easy to learn English or math, you know, but those things have benefits. I think a lot of folks, they're kind of seeing coding as having some benefits too. You know, having some of those foundational skills in programming. Like in my own state, they passed a law where children from K through 12 every year have to take programming as part of their normal education, just like they have to take math and English. I don't know if that necessarily has to be replicated everywhere, but it's interesting that this is the kind of conversation we're talking about now. Does it need to be a foundational skill or not? Is an open question. So.
It does. I mean, at least being exposed to it, because then you understand things. You understand when you download that app or you hear something on the news, you have a better understanding of the world. If at the very least you understand your world a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Nevada, Abigail. William, so you're not a teacher at all. You're have a totally different experience than Jill or Scott. So, and you're on the development team. So I think that you wanted to talk about something related but different. Probably the most popular stuff that is used in practice on Quorum is our AP Computer Science Principles content. So can you kind of walk us through how you do something like AP Computer Science if you can't see?
Sure. So with the computer science principles curriculum that we have, the curriculum is adapted from code.org's CSP curriculum. And this is for a really obvious reason. It is, as far as I know, the most widely used high school curriculum for computer science in, I think, the world. The reason why it's so used is because code.org, they have lots of resources, they have a lot of reach, and they have made a curriculum that is really slick. It's really packed with features that make it easy to interact with, to dig into the content, and has all these really cool features that are totally inaccessible. It is purely built out of visual tools, and it basically doesn't work with screen readers at all. Even if the tools did work with the screen readers, the lessons aren't designed with any thought about what happens if a child or if the user is interacting with this stuff and they can't see it. And so much of this goes down to, like we were already talking about in some of the previous questions and the keynote, sort of foundational issues. Code.org's CSP curriculum teaches code in JavaScript. And JavaScript they chose, I think, in part because it is a real language used by developers in the real world, and it makes it feel a little bit more authentic than using something like Scratch. Scratch being another very popular way to teach kids about programming. But because JavaScript is a real world language, it has that real world history to it. And that includes, it has a bunch of elements it's inherited from C and C++, the same sort of things that we've seen make it really difficult for novices to use the language. And that problem is exacerbated if you are a screen reader user, because like Stefik was saying, that for syntax for a loop is hard whether you can see or not. But if you have to hear it through a screen reader, not only do you have to understand the syntax, it's so easy to just miss little bits and pieces of context. You have to switch your screen reader to a specific mode to get all of the little bits and pieces of grammar to be output. You have to make sure that you're not missing like the one semicolon in the right place. A sighted user might forget the semicolon because they don't understand the language, but the blind user using the screen reader has to not only know that, or has to have the knowledge that it needs to be there, and also has to carefully scan it to make sure that it's there. Because JavaScript is kind of a clunky language for novices to learn, Code.org CSP curriculum comes with all sorts of niceties, with having blocks that you drag and drop that'll just get all that syntax right for you. It has particular apps that are already set up with tools for building user interfaces. So you have sort of like phone app style lessons. All of this stuff is really useful. but because it's not accessible, it's leaving out some of this potential for blind students. The blind student could just like open up a terminal and try and write some code, but it's just not the same experience. So when it comes to our attempt to make a computer science principles curriculum, we're looking at the stuff that code.org has made, which is really cool, but also completely inaccessible. And then the goal becomes, how can we preserve as much of this as possible and also make it accessible and give as close as possible to both the sighted kids and the non-sighted kids that might be in the same classroom? Because a lot of times, a bunch of the places where Quorum gets used is in schools just for BVI, right? And if you have your entire classroom all working on the same tool, that's obviously easier for the teacher. And if you're at a school, particularly for BVI, you have teachers there who are trained in working with just these students. But a lot of times you'll have individual blind students who are in mixed classrooms. They're in general educational settings, and the resources are really limited for those kids. They might not have people who are well trained or well versed, or who are, but are who is stretched way too thin. If we can provide the same tool that a sighted user can have, a full graphical interface, they can interact with all of the exact same widgets and tools, and then a blind student can use the exact same code, and the sighted student doesn't even need to necessarily know that it connects to a screen reader. They don't need to know that it's accessible, but it is for the student that needs it. And that involves some tech challenges on the background, some stuff that we have to build out into Quorum to make sure that it can talk to the screen readers. And then there's some changes of the curriculum that need to happen as well. Try and make them as small as possible, but certain kinds of things were designed for the sighted students. As an example of what that might look like, one of the lessons in computer science principles in code.org's CSP curriculum is what they call the Pixel Widget. And basically, they're trying to teach kids about how the pixels on a monitor are programmed and how a programmer makes something appear on the screen. And it's obvious why you'd want to do this for sighted students. It's a really really tangible way that you can say, here's something that code does, here is how you, the user, are receiving it. But the same output is really hard to give to a blind student without any extra tools, because you can't look at the screen to see, is this pixel red or is it blue? So we can adapt the widget. So we're still giving blind students the same thing. They're still learning the exact same concepts. They're even still learning about pixels, but this the widget has some extra tools on it that say, hey, now you can jump into this image that you're rendering onto the screen, and you can treat it like a grid basically, or a table, and basically go pixel by pixel and say, what color is this? What are the values I passed into it? And they're learning the exact same thing. And if you're a sighted student, the lesson still plays out the same way, but we're just giving you extra tools to interact with it as a blind student. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this is kind of one of the challenges that we've had in the lab is, if you have, and it's not just for people that cannot see, you can think of the exact opposite problem for people that are deaf, or people in the neurodiversity camp. If you're talking to people that are deaf, should they not learn about sound? I mean, it feels like it's an important concept that those students should learn. And if you're blind, it feels like you should know some concepts related to vision, even if you can't use that particular sense. Knowing about it lets you have meaningful conversations with those in the community that might have that experience. Thank you, William. So
absolutely.
one other question I want to pose to the group is, nowadays you've got, the community has come a long way. I mean, 10 years ago, or whatever it was, 15 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, right. You said this before, Jill, like there really wasn't anything going on related to coding 15 years ago. I mean, at least you and I have had that conversation before. But so today it's come a long way. So where do we need to go next? Like, what are the challenges now that kids face, that teachers face, that administrators face, whoever? What should we change? And where should we go next to make it, so that the next generation of kids has a real fighting chance of like making a difference? Maybe start with Jill, if that's okay.
Everything changes so quickly. That's the thing. It's just going to be keeping up with it. One of the things that I always wanted to stress when I was teaching Quorum is that it's a viable career path for our students. you know, with transportation being an issue, then it's great to have something that you can do at home. And now we've had the pandemic, and that a lot of people are working from home. Just continuing to make things accessible, especially working on the Braille support.
So Braille support, which particular thing are you wanting?
I'm sorry?
You said working on the Braille support. Is there something in particular you have in mind?
No, just in general, and it's not just Quorum.
Yeah. Okay. Scott, what do you think? Where do we need to go from here? Like, what are the big challenges that we face as a community?
Wow. From my perspective, which is sort of a little corner, really, we use a lot of gadgets, right? But gadgets like the Mindstorm EV3s, you know, things like that, drones. And well, everybody knows the problem with all these gadgets. They're continually, it's a problem. So for this week, I was wanting to get the robots going, the Minecraft robots, so that we could get some competitions going and code those, because it's very motivating. I think, and that's not your fault, right? Other companies develop these things, and it's just everything is so difficult, especially coming out of 2 years of lockdown. All of a sudden, all of our devices don't work anymore, right? You have to figure out how to do it again.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
I was going to say, yeah, those devices are always a real challenge for our dev team because there's thousands of them, right? So like that we can tackle, even if we have the funding to tackle the big ones, which we don't always, because we're just kind of, you know, we're funded by the National Science Foundation for certain projects or whatever it is. And that's what we've got. But, you know, the reality is a lot of these companies, they change stuff on the fly. It's weird, you know, like when Lego moved to the Spike kits, they actually didn't call me. I don't know why. I'm not really sure what they were thinking. They should have, right? But I mean, the truth is, and also like the difference between the EV3 and the Spike, I've actually looked at this because I'd really like to have Spike support for kids because it's not accessible right now. Like it's a totally different system. Like we have to redo the whole thing from scratch. And so we have to basically figure out, okay, how do we fund it? What do we have to do? Are we asking the NSF? Are we asking someone else? Where do we get the money to do stuff like that? And it's always like this ever-present funding challenge to try to make every company in the universe's stuff accessible for these kids, which is an impossible
And do it for them.
And do it for them, right? Like, you know, like the NVDA people, they have this problem too. They're trying to make every application in the universe accessible. It's an impossible problem. So on community funding, it's definitely hard. So I feel that pain all too much, Scott. So
I think, you know, what I see a student, they come in, they say, you know, my job is going to be web design. And they want to learn JavaScript. They don't want to learn Quorum, right? They want to learn something that they know is going to be important to them. And I'm trying to convince them, like, you need to learn how to code. You're going to end up learning 4 or 5 languages anyway. Learn to code, and then the other languages fall in place as you need them, as you have like me. It's like, if I have to figure out a problem, I go figure it out and then I implement it. They need to be able to do that.
And that's always a funny question I always get too, is why use language X at the beginning, right? And it's not always that question related to Quorum. I mean, if someone asks me just as a computer scientist, what language do I start with, is a really common question. But the truth of the matter is, that's why I always bring up this study by Antti Jahani, right? There was 22 experiments. Computer scientists do not know the answer to this question. They do not know it, right? And that's always what's so funny. Like, and then if you look at the academics, what language do they start with? Well, actually, there isn't an answer, right? You look at college, it's all over the map. ML, C++, JavaScript, Java, it's all over, Python, whatever it is. If you look at the high schools, same problem. It could be Scratch. Scratch is a different language than Snap. Snap is a different language than JavaScript. Code.org is its own thing. And so it's like, there's really no consistency across it. And this is a real problem because, like, you know, we don't do this in math, right? Like, can you imagine if math was done the same way, where every single school across the United States had a different meaning for the plus character? It would make no sense at all. we would think it's an absolute absurdity. Like the integral symbol is different everywhere. Why would you do that? It just would drive kids mad. And teachers would be stuck in the middle being like, well, I don't even know what to do. But that's exactly what we're doing in programming right now. We just basically make it a big mess. We don't have any evidence on any of it. And it's all discrimination against people with disabilities half the time, which doesn't even follow the law. It's just a really odd time in the field of computer science for that all that sort of stuff to be happening all at once. It's weird. It's strange. But
and then everybody has their favorite language. It's like a romance, right? Somebody swears by Ruby, or they, whatever it is, that's what they use, and they know how to use it, and they know they can make the tool, whatever they're trying to make. And it's a bigger world, right?
Yeah, it's hard to know.
That makes me think about the argument whether for math and Braille are we going to use Nemeth code or we're going to use UEB technical. I mean, it's not to the same extent you're talking about with programming language, but it's a similar idea there.
I do think it's a similar idea. I don't know the debate probably as well as you do. I know there was like all sorts of stuff with like the math related Brailles and UEB and like, I don't know, I'm sure you're going to tell me this is all wrong, and that's good because you know better than I do. But I recall it was quite the debate for quite a long time.
Yes,
so.
It still is.
It still is. Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm not surprised. Yeah. Okay. Well, what do you think, William? I know that we actually have priorities in the lab, so maybe you want to give people just kind of like a brief preview of what's coming next, so people can know like what they're going to do in the classroom at some point.
Sure. So at this point with Quorum on the development side, we're continuing to work on the stuff that we already have in terms of polishing up the games and user interface stuff. But the biggest stuff that we have coming down the pipe is inclusions for data science, which you showed some of during the keynote, and iterations on the block language stuff, because that's something that is useful for students to have. And in terms of that broader question of where we move from here, we have particular things that we're developing in the lab right this second. But I would think that not so much on the educational side, because I'm not as qualified to speak on that, but on the technical side of like where we go on an engineering front in Quorum and outside of Quorum, I think the biggest thing is increasing the accessibility on the foundations of the tools that people are using. You showed Unity as one of the examples in the keynote, and Unity is not accessible. And one of the big problems is if Unity wanted to go today to go make that accessible, it would be really hard for them to do that because the foundations were just never designed to have that in the first place. But the more you can make it so that future tools get built with things that considered accessibility from the start, that were born accessible, I think that over time we can increase it to a point where more things become more compatible with screen readers, and it becomes less of a marathon to get individual people to switch their individual tools over, because we know that this is something that with other tools that are out there too, whether that's like, code.org stuff, Scratch, if you look at, R or MATLAB or et cetera, these aren't tools that can't be made in some way that's accessible, but they're built on tools that make it difficult to get there. So the more stuff that we can do in the lab, and that's done by people outside of the lab, the more foundational stuff we can build up, I think the more we can build up accessibility across the field. And on our end, that starts with data science and blocks coming up in the near future here.
Yeah, data science also has this, or at least the argument we made to the National Science Foundation, which for whatever crazy reason they seem to believe, it also opens up another viable profession, because all of a sudden now you can do any kind of statistics related work accessibly. You can do all the charts and graphs stuff accessibly. And that's coding, but also kind of not, because it's also like data analysis or epidemiology, or there's a number of professions kind of baked into that might be plausible.
Right.
I'd really like to invent, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know you already mentioned, but Nick Caducci, you were showing one of those examples in R, and it's like, this is something that he has to do. He has to interact with this stuff. And, the world, we can make it friendlier, but it's something that these are problems that people face right now already. And you can make it through with some serious effort in some cases. Yeah. But, and there's other fields where it's like, if you wanted to go become a 3D modeler, I don't think there's any accessible 3D modeling tool out there right now, but there might be in the future, right?
Yeah, it's totally possible to invent that. I'd love to have 3D modeling accessible, CAD accessible. Why shouldn't there be a visual effects engineer that's blind at Disney? It feels like there should be. It's totally doable. it is possible to invent that technology. It's just hard, right? Like, you know, it's not cup of tea worthy, but it's like maybe a cup of 1,000 teas or something, you know. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
oh, go ahead.
as you say, starting with smaller things, but there's a lot that can be built up to over time.
William Adams just asked, are you able to make Quorum to make an executable GUI for entering and retrieving information into a database like SQL? Because I'd love to teach some data management. Yes, it came out in Quorum 9.5. That's actually public now. We haven't actually made the documentation for that yet. So it's a little hard to use because we haven't written it down, but it is there. The technology is there, and it's quite good. My student wrote an entire dissertation on that exact topic to try to figure out how to make that easier to use. It turns out not simple to make it easy to use, but possible. And it is built into 9.5. We'll use it in the lab. I know it works. So we will get documentation on it at some point, probably some lessons or something, I'm guessing at some point, but we haven't finished that yet. So, okay, another question, especially for teachers, just because you know, William's on the tech side, so he would know this already. But one of the things that often comes up in talking about Quorum stuff is we don't always have our feet on the ground, you know, to talk to kids, to talk to teachers, because, you know, I sit in my office and I invent stuff all day, right? But some of the most inspiring stuff that we've done actually came from the community. Like, for example, the reason we have a 3D editor today is because a blind child told me, I swear this is true, we said, what would you like to do? And he said, I want to write 3D games with my friends. And I said something like, I don't know how to invent that. And he said, that's not my problem. But so what other things are not my problem, but you want to make it my problem, Jill and Scott? What should be invented for the BVI community that doesn't exist today? What would inspire your kids, the next generation? That's a hard question, but give it a shot.
That's hard, but I do have a request. So the way I'm doing it, because I'm not a CS professional, going through, you know, the control structures and types and, you know, all the different things that you can learn on the Quorum website. There's not many examples out there, right? So if I need to change my control type, right, where do I find an example of how that can be done? If I type in, and I just did it a minute ago, you know, Quorum language example projects. There's not much out there. If you do that for Python or C++, there's thousands. You know, there's 150 different sites, all with their own. You know, there's a guy with a blog with his 40-some projects, right? Because at some point, I'm not able to really teach somebody how to make a program. Teaching them the parts of a program are one thing. But if I can show an example, like a tic-tac-toe game, something simple, that you can see how, you know, if this, you know, then you move on and you can see the logic of it and you can teach the logic.
That's a great idea. We should actually have more examples. Hey, William, you want to toss in that the example of the 3D game that you have? That one's a fun example.
Sure. What do you want me to like actually bring it up and share my screen and show it, or what?
No, let's not do that right now, but like maybe just put in the example. We do have a few examples, but you're right, Scott. I think that's something that we could probably needs to be worked on.
Through the curriculum, there's mixed in, you know, projects that you do in different sections, and they could be an example project, right? Something, because it's something you can open it, run it, and then open it and read it. Right, get your Braille display, emboss it out.
That's great. What about you, Jill? What do you think? What should be invented that's not there, or what other things do you think should change? Documentation, whatever you want. What would you like?
Just to build on what he's saying, I think he's got some good points about more examples and being able to emboss the examples and use the Braille display.
Gotcha. Okay. Then I see one suggestion in there is more web design stuff. That's good. I think that William Adams would like to have some more database examples. That sounds good. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So what am I missing? Like, what else is what are the URLs for Quorum and Unity? I can get Quorum. Unity, I would have to Google, but I can do that really quick, or somebody can put that in. So what else are we missing? Like, what else is is going on in schools today that could be adjusted to make things better for the next generation? Like, what else are we missing that we haven't talked about in this panel that we think that should be adjusted or changed at schools? Or like, should the Council of Schools for the Blind get involved to do stuff? Should we have administrators meeting up to talk about coding? Like, what else would bring us to sort of the next level to try to get the whole community as involved as possible? In other words, this is more of a community question as opposed to like a tech question.
Well, getting administrators behind the idea of the importance of coding is important.
Right.
If they support it, and there's staffing and the financial backing to support it, it's going to be much more robust.
Yeah, that's true. We always have kind of cobbled together funding from wherever we can find it, right? So that we can make this stuff work as best as possible. Now, granted, we've been very lucky. The National Science Foundation has funded us a tremendous amount over the years. That's why William is employed and stuff like that. But and we have 2 programmers full-time now, which is great. I mean, like, for an academic scholar, 2 full-time people is just unheard of. But at the same time, like, 2 people, well, Microsoft has more employees. Apple's doing a little better, right? It's just the amount of resources is pretty low. What do you think, Jill, or William too? Like, what else do you think that the community should do as a whole to try to bring this stuff to the next level? Because it's not just about us, right? Like, we try to invent stuff and give it to the community, but that, we're only a couple people. So what should the community do to bring this to the next level, Jill?
Just keep on getting the message out there. Sometimes the administrators are resistant to it, sometimes the teachers are, sometimes the students are. And it's just, when you think back just over the time that I've been involved, it's amazing how far things have come. And that's just an amazing dedication step that the junior team have had. And as a blind person, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that. But that would be the thing, just keep getting the message out there.
Yeah,
and not just this is something we need to do, but give them ideas of how they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, or like, set them free to do it their own way. Because like, right. I know a lot of these schools, I mean, we do our best to write, documentation stuff, but like, we don't know everybody's needs. I mean, we just don't. Like, there's so many people that are involved. It's like, I can totally imagine, that at the Washington State School for the Blind, they've done this way differently than in Alabama. I don't even know exactly what you used to do in Alabama. I know that you taught for years.
It was really hard. And the main challenge that, was working Quorum in with all the assistive technology things that I needed to cover too. And of course, that's a challenge for everybody at the time. And that's an argument you might get too. Well, we don't have time to do that.
Absolutely.
But when you realize that this is completely a career path that one of your students could take, and I have one of my former students in mind right now that would be perfect for, that makes it so worth it.
That makes sense. Or in California, I imagine you guys do stuff differently too, Scott, but I don't know.
Yeah, I get, I'm going to show my ignorance here. It would be nice if, so what environments is Quorum able to code for? It can't code for iOS, can it?
So that's a complicated question. So,
well, it could.
No, it does actually. Okay. It's just, this is a little bit tricky. So here's the thing. Quorum uses this thing on the back end called transpiling. I won't go into the details, but basically it can convert itself into many things. And this answers Michael Villafine's, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, question as well. Quorum can translate itself on the fly to JavaScript, which is how you can run it in a browser. And it can translate itself on the fly to Objective-C as well for iPhones. But here's the catch. It turns out that every single manufacturer that is out there wrote their own accessibility libraries and none of them are compatible at all. So like if you write compatibility for accessibility on Windows, which we've done, it is useless on the iPhone, it is useless on Android, it is useful on Mac, it is useless on Linux. And then on Linux, there's like 30 different flavors and it's like, oh, just forget it. So, and each of those is expensive. Like we've thought internally, so we have a version of Quorum Studio that works on Mac and you can click a button and it will literally send itself to an iPhone, but you don't have voiceover support. We've looked at it. I think it costs us like $1 million to build it. And like, I'd love to do it. It's just that like the problem is the amount of labor is so huge because it's complicated because like the system's just not compatible. So this is one of these complicated questions where technically what you could do, you could write your application on Windows using MBDA or JAWS or whatever. And then if you can get that program to a Mac, you can send it to your iPhone and that would work. It's just super clunky because like that's a really tricky thing to do. So yes, you can do it now, but there's some limitations that none of us like on the team. So
it's like answering that question of why. So when the student says, well, why should I learn that? I want to learn Python. Somebody told me I need JavaScript or I need Java. So a student wants to do mods for Minecraft, and it's written in Java. So what do? You have to know Java. And that, for her, that's important. So that
it's
why.
The reality of the splintered nature of computer science. I mean, honestly, it would not surprise me. I don't have any knowledge of this, but would not surprise me if that the CS discipline was eventually regulated because it's such a mess. And this has happened before. Like, believe it or not, like, so we have a standard character set in computer science called ASCII, and later it became Unicode. That was not done by manufacturers. In fact, that was actually Lyndon Johnson that ordered it. And Congress passed a law and then Lyndon Johnson put it in the executive order. And then there was decades of complaining about it. And then it eventually was kind of just, that was the standard. It wouldn't surprise me if someday somebody in Congress is going to be like, hey, computer scientists, could you please agree on what plus means? That'd be great. Right? Because it's such a trivial thing. There's no logical reason why we can't agree at least on partially, but this is the state of the time we live in. Computer science 100 years from now is going to look a lot different, I think. But for now, it's a big bloody mess. And that is kind of the truth. So let's see if there's other questions that came in. Let's see. There was one question. Oh, yeah. I asked Michael's. Deborah says the schools for the blind are in the forefront, but it leaves mainstream blind kids out. Create a MOOC for blind teens worldwide to learn programming. Oh, that's an interesting idea. WSSB is Cosby is working on it. They offered a state school only APCASP class this year. They're working on an outreach version. Yeah, that's right. I think Amanda Rodda and Gina Fugate did that this year. So that's interesting. And that's an interesting idea of how do we get, is this community question, how do we get Cosby and other groups involved so that we can have kind of broader impacts? Because I think that both Jill and Scott have both said this. One of the challenges is that there just aren't that many computer science teachers that have, BVI skills right now. Jill, you've been in the community forever, and there just aren't that many Jills, so, and Scott too, of course. So
I could be a Jill eventually.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I know we're running out of time. I think that we were scheduled to end at 9:50. So let me just say thank you a ton to William, Jill, and Scott for being on this panel and for all of the work all of you do for different reasons. Obviously, William for inventing a mountain of stuff that I don't have to go invent myself, and that also you are better at in many ways. And then Jill for all the stuff you do with teaching, and Scott as well, and your new gig as well. So thank you again. And thanks to Adrian and the rest of you for inviting all of us to talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefik.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all very much.
Bill. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, William. That was very well done. Very hit home. I personally hear your challenge to the community. I know that my own goals are to go a lot further than Schools for the Blind, and we have the foundations of some of that. But let's start with Schools for the Blind next year. Let's create an hour of code expectation that we do something special across this nation during this coding symposium week that is accessible, and then let's branch off and try to make that something that we can take into the whole community. I'm down for that. I really appreciate this perspective from this panel. These last couple of years, I've taken a shallow dive into the programming world and a much deeper dive into the educational space for teaching coding to blind and low vision students. And during this panel, this question came up of which language should we start with? This has come up all the time in my space that I've jumped into. And you did address that that this current space of coding is inconsistent. From the language perspective, it's messy. There does need to be more consistency built into it. And because of that, I think I've heard from some professionals in our community and coders that like, oh, I don't know about Quorum. It's not a mainstream language. It's unlikely to yield job potential for a student. And I don't hear Stefik, you or William or anybody else voicing this, but Quorum has a very obvious answer to this comment that Quorum is not a mainstream language. And it's to simply start with a language that is simple to learn. It's got evidence-based practice and accessibility at the heart of it and the foundation of it. Scott made a comment during this panel that most programmers end up needing to know a handful of codes anyway to be viable in the job space and to get a job. So get started. We all need to take to heart to get started in an easy space to teach kids the general premises of coding and let them find their sweet spot. Or to quote Scott again, so eloquently put it, to find their coding romance, right? Let kids find that code language that speaks to them. So participants participating in the Coding Symposium, it was meant to do that. It was to capture your interest in coding and programming as a whole, and to start you down your path to find a future in technology. And I know that some of you are questioning whether a future in technology is what you want. And I'll generalize a comment that Stefik made during this panel. He made it about the importance of blind people learning the concepts of vision. We know that this world is moving so quickly into a space where technology is everywhere. And learning the basics of coding, whether or not you want to join the world of programming, will let you have meaningful conversations with members of the community and people who are engaging with the technology that's driving our future. So learn coding anyway. It is an important start and embraces what the Common Core is doing with Hour of Code, and we ought to be doing it too. I know we're a couple minutes over. We do not forget the awards section of our website with the National Coding Symposium. Coding's tricky. We know that it's not super simple. And so we know that some of you would benefit from a Braille display, a video magnifier, something that will give you a little bit more of an edge to succeed in this space. So we have partners from the American Printing House for the Blind, Vespero, which is the company that runs JAWS and Freedom Scientific and ZoomText, and Humanware, providing awards up to $3,000 for 6 different individual participants of the Coding Symposium. You must not only attend the Coding Symposium, but you must register for that award on our Coding Symposium website by filling out a very simple form. We also have STEM scholarships available from the Peter Papano APH STEM Scholarship, a fantastic scholarship, great money for high school seniors looking towards a STEM career, a STEM undergrad and going to college in the STEM field. Additionally, if you head over to our awards page, you will find a cool accessibility and inclusion contest sponsored by one of our Coding Symposium sponsors, which gave us money to make this happen. The Fox Family Foundation has an accessibility and inclusion contest for students 14 to 20 years old. You can find more information about that on our website. I'm gonna let Leanne describe our next little switcheroo that will separate out some of our students and our teachers.
Hello, all. Glad you are all with us. I am going to pause the recording for right now.
All right, welcome back to our next session, everybody. We are in a concurrent session, so teachers are over learning teacher things with Gina Fugate from the Maryland School for the Blind. Amanda Rodda is here from the Washington State School for the Blind. Amanda is a STEM math teacher at the Washington State School for the Blind who has taken coding to heart and is one of our nation's leaders as a TVI teaching Quorum. to our students who are blind and low vision. Amanda, thank you for joining us. I am excited about what you have on our plate to teach us right now a little bit about Quorum. Take it away.
Great. All right. Hi, guys. Welcome. Like Adrian said, my name is Amanda Rodda. Kids call me Miss Rodda, but whatever. It's cool. I answer to just about everything. Today, I do have students in the room with me. They're making faces at me. It's fine. We are going to work on a project. We're just going to hop right in and code, because that's, to me, the easiest way to learn anything is just hop right in and get started. And yes, I have at least one student in the I don't know, virtual verse out there. Hi, Emmy. Emmy is part of my class that I teach with Miss Fugate, who is over teaching the teachers right now. This year, we had a class that was open to students from schools, state schools or entities or whatever in your state that helps blind students. And we taught AP CSP. So you had the possibility of taking the class, taking a big scary test, which half the kids took on Monday and the other half will take next Wednesday, and earning some college credit. Part of the class was learning programming, and part of the class was learning like general computer science stuff, like how does the internet work, how do routers work, how do, what is data security, what is that, what is cybersecurity. Those were all parts of the class too. So high schoolers, if you are interested in any of those things, pester the adults in your world to figure out how to get you into one of those classes, because I would say 10th grade and up could English, I speak it. I would say that about 10th grade and up could take that class. Okay. And I did just see a request in the chat to run JAWS while I write my code, and I will most definitely do that. I was actually just waiting for JAWS to like wake up on my computer, because I have several things running, and we all know that JAWS is a memory hog. Yeah, okay. We'll do that a little bit. I think I might just run JAWS through Quorum Studio, and then I think I will play human screen reader so that you guys can interact.
JAWS Zoom webinar CP toolbar
There it goes. All right. It's very weird. I have speakers away from my computer right now, so I'm hearing weird things. All right. So what I'm going to do first is, with JAWS on, I am going to look through the Quorum Studio software and just kind of run through how that software works. That is a compiler, so that's where we write our code and we hit run, and it will let you see whatever we've written. It'll run the game or program or whatever we've done. Okay. So I'm gonna do share screen.
Open chat panel. Share screen.
Gonna make sure I share sound.
Checkbox check. The clear check mark.
And I think I need to do a full
Sharing options with
desktop.
box. Use arrow. Cube of started screen share.
Meeting control.
Don't judge me.
Quorum Studio 3.0.0. Projects preview. SBA week open. Scenes open. Scene.qs to move through or expand item.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Hi, froze.
Meeting.
Okay, so that was a fail with JAWS running. So I'm just gonna play human screen reader. Sorry, guys.
Sometimes when you add one too many tools, this happens.
Yep. So I'm just going to play human screen reader. I do it all the time for my students. If I miss any, big key commands or anything like that that anybody wants, please holler at me, okay? All right, so now I'm going to try share screen again and see if it likes it better. Excellent. Okay. And guys, I'm pretty good at monitoring chat and working at the same time. So please feel free to put those questions, put questions out there. Okay. All right. So I have Quorum Studio open, and that is software, like I said. So it's a separate download on my computer. And I have a very old version because we love firewalls and technology. That's fine, still works, we're good. And I am going to stop using my mouse, hide that away so that I do the things I should. And I'm going to navigate this with the keyboard because you can, that's the whole point, right? All right, so if I do Control-1, I hop. If I focus on Quorum first, it's gonna call me a liar. That's my favorite thing. There we go. Excellent. So I am in the project screen, which if you're a sighted user, it's a panel on the left side of the screen. Project tree. There are 3 tabs in this particular area: projects, scenes, and palettes. If you saw Andy's keynote at the start of the day, he was looking at the scenes and the palettes to start programming a 3D game. The first activity we're going to look at before we actually hop in and code our own is modified code that some of my students made to submit for their CSP program. Now, I did modify it so that I'm not breaking any rules from College Board. So I have navigated down to their screen. And when I hit enter on that, it automatically puts you into the text editor side, which is where your code is. Okay. And I know we're all different levels of programming in our world here. Whitney, human screen reader is me talking. That's human screen reader. It is open source. I am free to use whenever I'm available. Okay, so I know we all have different levels of programming, and I'm going to do a real basic run through so that we don't get bored of my voice. Okay, we have libraries at the top. In Quorum, we use the statement use because you use a library so that you can do something. Again, words in Quorum make sense. If you think that's how the computer might run, you're probably right. Okay. We have a couple libraries so that we can do some specific other actions and other codes. We have a class. Classes in programming, I like to think of them as separate pages of your project. Each one is kind of focused on a specific thing. So class main would be the main page of the program. I have a variable here that is called text first equals, and then I have blank quotation marks here, just an open and close quotation mark. And that's a variable that I'm going to use many places in the code here. Okay. One of the things you have to use in CSP is arrays for your project. Arrays, in this case, we're just making a list of things. So we have 3 arrays here. We have practical jokes. We have school help, and we have defensive products. So as I'm going through this, some of you might realize before we get to any real questions, any real bits of the code or explanations of the code, what this program relates around. So if I tell you we've got practical jokes, school help, and defensive products, What genre do you think we're talking about here for this program? And go ahead and throw it in the chat. Practical jokes, school help, defensive projects or products. I'm sorry. What do you think these kids might be thinking about coding? Games. It's not quite a game. It's not quite a game. Any other thoughts? All right. Weasley Brothers shop. Did you read down farther? I think Whitney read down farther on my screen. All right. Yes. So this program is going to ask some questions and then randomly choose some items for us from the Weasley Brothers shop. All right. So now I have an action. Action is reusable code for the most part. Other languages might call them a function, but we call it action in Quorum. And now I start adding to my arrays. I have defensive products, add instant darkness powder. Defensive products, add decoy detonators. So those are two things that are now in my list or my array of defensive products. Next, we have school help, add. All right, I'm going to say it wrong. Skeeving smack boxes. Maybe I'm supposed to say snack boxes. There's probably a typo in here. That's okay. Now we have school help, add quills. So we've added some school supplies to our list. Practical jokes, add canary creams. Practical jokes, add portable swamp. All right. I'm not going to read through the rest of this code right now. We're just going to run it and we're going to play this program. And I want suggestions from y'all as to how I answer the questions. So put them in chat for me. All right. I'm going to run my program. And to run my program, I can just hit Wesley. Yes, they in other languages could also be called stacks. The arrays can be used either, basically the same thing in this case. All right, so Control R is running my program. My console says building, running, build successful, and then a whole bunch of text spit out at the bottom, and this is what was programmed. It says, welcome to Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, your one-stop shop for managing your mischief. There's a lot to choose from, so we've decided to make it simple. To start, choose a category. Your choices are practical jokes, school help, and defensive products. For practical, type P. School, type S. Defensive, type D. Lowercase letters only. All right, Emerald says type P. So I'm going to go down. You can barely see it because of the font on my computer. But I'm going to go down to a bar and I'm going to type P. And I'm going to hit enter. And now in that console, which I could navigate back and forth with my key commands, it added your recommended item is canary creams for practical jokes. And it says, would you like to make another selection? Yes or no? Well, of course, we're going to make another selection. Typing in the word yes, hitting enter. Your choices are P for practical jokes, S for school help, D for defensive. The next letter I saw originally was D. So let's see what defensive does. Your recommended item is decoy detonators. Would you like to make another selection? Well, let's go ahead and use all three, shall we? We're going to say yes and enter. What was my other letter, guys? I forgot. Yeah, S, right? Cool. Thank you. Y'all are faster than me. We got Skeeving smack boxes. Would you like to make another selection? Guys, we could go on forever hitting yes. We're going to say no and hit enter. Mischief managed. Thank you for shopping. And then that would end the program. So the students used 3 different arrays here. We have input from a user. Okay, that first sentence, and then everything we typed after. We use random number generator, random integer generator, to pull a random item off of our arrays. We have an action that uses repeat while, and repeat is the word for loops in Quorum. Inside that, we have the conditionals of if and else if that take that letter that you've typed and then go pick an item off our list, off our array. And then once you type no, it shuts everything down for us and says mischief managed. Thanks for shopping. So that's a program, again, that I modified, that students submitted as their like end of course, here's our project submission. And for that, there's just certain rules. They had to have arrays, they had to use if, they had to use repeat, little rules like that, but the rest of it is very open-ended. Okay, so that's programming in Quorum Studio. Now, I know that a lot of schools, if you're using your school device, it's kind of locked down, right? You can't download your own programs. So what if you want to do Quorum? Guess what? This is where we're going to work together. And we are going to go, if the computer will let me, to the interwebs. And we are going to go to quorumlanguage.com. In a moment. There it goes. And I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom of the main page of quorumlanguage.com. And there's a header that says Run Quorum Online. And then we have a little baby compiler here, a little baby IDE, Integrated Development, and yeah, I said that wrong. Integrated Development Environment. Will it run on Windows 7? That's an Andy question. I do not know the answer to that. I'm gonna say probably not anymore. Try it and find out. There's your answer. So one of the assignments that was up for us to use, if anybody got to do any of the activities for the coding symposium that were put up for Quorum, can I just get a yes or a hands up or something if you got to do one of the Quorum activities already? Emmy did them. Of course you did, Emmy. Expect nothing less. I know I got at least one in the room with me who did them. No? Okay. All right, you know what? I think I'm gonna cheat. I'm the teacher and I can. So I already have a username and password in Quorum, which lets me save my projects. So if you can see my screen, there's probably 2 pages of projects saved here, which is really cool. You can save them, you can load them again, you can share them. As long as you have clicked them public, you can share your programs with others. It will send them a link, which will send them to the IDE screen, and they can hit run, and then they can play your program. Let's look at the escape room activity. The escape room is by far my favorite. And we are going to what are we going to do? We are going to delete stuff, and y'all are going to help me fill it in. I think that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to make our own project here. We're going to use my shell, and then we are going to make our own changes. Okay. So, very top of our code says integer searches equals 0. And then I have a comment. / lets you comment your code. Commenting your code is very important so that other people know what you're thinking when they look at your code. And it says this is the counter. So I've named it searches, and it's an integer. So what do we think an integer is going to do? Math question. I'm a math teacher. Math questions always sneak their way into my stuff. A variable is a box that holds information. What kind of information would an integer hold? Emmy, you can save the day and answer. Ooh, Boone answered. Nice, correct, Boone. A number with no decimal places. Whole numbers and opposites. Those are all excellent answers. Very good. Number information. Yeah, excellent. Specifically, integers have no decimal points. So they're those whole numbers and opposites. Excuse me. Phone alarm's going off. So they're those whole numbers and their opposites. I like that answer. And I named it searches, and we're talking about an escape room. So somewhere along the line, this number is going to change based on searching things. So what you name a variable is important too. So you can remember what you called it, right? And so that it makes sense, again, when someone else is looking at your code. Okay? All right. Text name equals input. Then we have parentheses and quotation marks. We're going to write a sentence here that welcomes people to our escape room and asks them their name. Anybody got any ideas on what we should type here? Jenny. No, we're writing the sentence that is asking for a name. Introductions. Well, so should we say welcome? This is more of a story mode, right? So how about you find yourself in a dark room? What is your name? Right? Sound good? Now we have another question for them. Start equals input. Text start equals input. Then I have name plus quote. Would you like to look around? Yes or no? Quote parenthesis. In the first question, we saved it as the variable name. So whatever the person types in there when we run our code, it goes in the box, right? Because variables are boxes. Name's name. And I can use that box again and again and again. And whatever you put in it, it's going to pull it back out. Okay. So if we put Jenny in and we ran this code, it would say, Jenny, would you like to look around? Yes or no? Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? How variables work? If you've taken anything in math class where you had a variable and x equals 6, and then they said, what is 3x? Right? We pull that 6, we stick it next to the 3, and we say 3 times 6 is 18. Right? It's the exact same idea. Whatever you put in the box that is the variable, you can pull out again and use it however you need to use it. Okay. Now, I have repeat until searches equals 3. Anybody know what that might mean? Repeat until. Repeat until searches equals 3. It might be 3 times. It is a loop, and it might go 3 times. But if I don't write anything in here that changes the word searches, changes that value, and it's currently 0, would I ever leave my loop? Or would I be there forever? Because it has to equal 3, and it's currently 0. If I never change it along the way, it's gonna keep going through the loop. So it might take us only 3 times. It might take us 33 times to get through this. We haven't decided that yet. Well, I did in my brain when I designed this program, right? But, all right. Now we have another variable. We have if. So if is a conditional, right? We've all used conditionals in our lives. If it is raining, I will wear my jacket, right? So if start, which was the variable for our question, would you like to look around, equals yes, then it's going to do a whole big bunch of stuff that runs the rest of our code, runs the rest of our program. Okay? So if we have yes, we're going to look around. Now I want us to change the 3 things we see in this room. I have a chair, a table, and a bed. Give me 3 more things instead. What are we going to look at? What's in our room? Remember, because we're changing this up to make it our own. Instead of a chair, a table, and a bed, what am I looking at? An elephant. All right. I saw elephant, window, and wardrobe. That's it. We see an elephant, window, whoop, I can't type, and a wardrobe. Wardrobe. There we go. Cool. So, all right, we're going to be searching an elephant at some point in this game. Excellent. Which would you like to look at? And we're going to change our original answers to elephant, window, wardrobe. Cool. Now remember, we're not playing it right now. Okay. So if they chose elephant, I have an if inside my if. I have a conditional inside my conditional. That is called nested conditional. Changing window to elephant because that was our first choice, right? All right. We're looking at the elephant. What are we going to describe our elephant as? Because I have the chair has a rip in the cushion. Would you like to look inside? We are not putting a rip in the elephant. How are we investigating our elephant? The elephant is a giant. Great. Okay, let's do it this way. How about there is a giant elephant. Oh, how about we say a giant elephant in a cage? I'll combine the 2 things. Elephant. I keep spelling elephant wrong, so you know. In a cage. In the corner. Would you like to look inside? Does that still work for ours? We'll be looking inside the cage, right? We're not looking inside the elephant. Let's not go there. Not go there. Okay, so would you like to look inside? Yes or no? If they say yes, we've got another conditional. If they say yes, what do they find? I have that you find a magnet. Do we have a different answer? In the cage, you find the elephant. How is the elephant going to let me escape? Poop. How is poop going to help me escape? Dynamite. Oh. Oh, good question. Okay, hang on. I think I like dynamite. We're going to use some dynamite this time. You find dynamite. And then I have a question here that I will update and answer. So I skipped. Oops, I spelled it wrong. I skipped a step, didn't I? Somebody caught my mistake. So we're using the variable chair and chair y here to save some of these answers. Do we need to change the name of that variable to elephant? Is it required for our code to run? I'm getting some yeses. I'm getting a no. All right, let's run it and see what happens. Now, there's a small glitch. You should be able to use Control-R to run here, but then it'll eat your code. So don't use Control-R. Navigate to the run button, which you can do finding buttons on your page. Okay. Build successful. Oh, it's going to take it 8 years. So Michael, I will update the name of this and I will put the link so that you guys can read the code line by line. Why? Guys. Breathe. We love technology. Technology is amazing. We love technology. Technology is amazing. It's not working. I'm going to save this real fast. We're going to say coding Symposium project. So it's not usually a slow computer, Emmy. Aha! Oh no. What? What is this? I got a warning. I got a thing here that says they couldn't save my project. Save my project, please. Run my project. Save my project. Oh goodness. Hey, I love finding bugs, but not when I'm presenting things. How do we work around this, folks? What do we do? I forgot to change. Where? What did I forget to change? I didn't change any of my variable names, so it should still be working. Oh, you're saying it's not working because it says chair? All right, let's see. I'm going to change it to elephant. 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 I can't type. Hello, email. Elephant. Okay. I'm trying this again. But it says build successful. And then it's not running. I don't know what's wrong. Goodness. All right. I love computers. summer. Computers are the best. You know what? Control A, Control C. What did I just do with Control A, Control C? Does anybody know? You know, what is it? Control A. Oh, great, thank you. Control A is select all, and Control C is copy. Correct. I copied my code. Now Control V is going to paste it in a new window. And I was just told I have a typo on elephant. So I'm going to fix that. Hey, this is real life decoding here, right, guys? Like debugging. That's what you do. Because it's how I remember that it's an A instead of an E at the end. All right, let's try. Running again. Aha! It worked. Hey, that R. I bet it was that R. Who found the R? From the panelists to the attendees. I didn't get a name. Who was it? You get props. You found. James found it. Good job, James. Okay, so I ran the code and I got a pop-up box that says 1-800, I need to debug now. Yes, Zachary, yes. All right. You find yourself in a dark room. What is your name? We're going to use James, since James was the one that found the bug. James, would you like to look around? Well, of course, we're going to say yes. You see an elephant, a window, and a wardrobe. Which would you like to look at? Well, we've only worked on elephant, so we're going to say elephant. Oh, I can't type it. Guys, I just spelled elephant wrong. You proud of me? Yay. Elephant. You see, there's a giant elephant in a cage in the corner. Would you like to look inside? Yes or no? Well, of course, we're going to say yes. In the cage, you find dynamite. Press enter to continue your search. Okay, now it takes us back because we're not done yet. Oh no. Oh no, now we're stuck in a loop. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Hey, guess what? We've already got it copied. I'm just gonna do it again. 400 times. It's fine. Opening another tab, closing the last tab so it stops running. Putting our code back in. Taking the R back out of elephant because there's not an R in elephant. Cool. And I'm gonna build successful. Perfect. Okay. So after we find the dynamite in the cage, I have this searches equals searches plus 1. Bye to my kids. Searches equals searches plus 1. What does that do, guys? This is a math question. Searches was 0. So 0 plus 1 is, yeah, it adds 1. So now my searches equals 1. Yes, please. Hi, honey. So searches equals 1. Great. And I end my loop, which takes me all the way back to the top where we had repeat until searches equals 3. Are we going to go in there? Yes, it'll keep going now. Okay. All right. Now, what if the person said no, they don't want to search the elephant? Right now, that else statement, because we don't use if then, or I'm sorry, English. We don't use then in here, right? And if we have one other statement for our if this, if that, if that, if that. If we just have one other thing, we can just say else. If elephant equals yes, do this thing. Anything else, so we just say else, do that thing. Okay. And I have a comment here that says it's left blank to just exit the conditional. If you write anything other than yes, it's going to kick you out of the conditional and take you back to the top. Okay. So that's for, not that any of you would ever do this. Nobody would ever write something like poop as an answer when somebody's looking for yes or no, right? We would never do that. Of course you would, because that's what you do, right? You try to find the bugs in other people's games. It's what I do all the time. So that leaving it blank means if they typed anything other than yes, start them over. Okay. All right. So now let's fix our window. Window. Table becomes window. Table becomes window. Okay. I'm going to change all of the tables to window, and then we're going to change our messages and what happens. Okay. So you can. Karina asks, could you use a find and replace? You could. You totally could. Honestly, I forget that exists most days. Not gonna lie. All right, so I'm not gonna lie. Most days I forget find exists. My students tend to know this fact, but I don't. All right, so I have a new class coming in. My new class coming in, have a seat. We are programming an escape room right now.
Oh,
so have a seat and you can just participate responsibly when I ask questions, okay?
okay.
Cool. So far in our escape room, we have an elephant, and now we're talking about a window. So people want to look through a window. It said originally that we had a table, and the table was empty. What do we want to say about a window? There's a window in the room.
The window has bars on it?
Ooh, the window has bars on it.
Or it looks like a pirate ship, like one of the little wooden crosses.
Go ahead, Isaac.
Maybe you can identify something that helps you connect some dots on like a piece of paper or something.
So currently we have found dynamite.
If we found dynamite, maybe a hole or a dig mine you can see through the window. Maybe like a little, like a piece of paper, like connect dots to find numbers to type in a code. No, what
Okay.
I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to say is like, you find where that dynamite came from.
Okay.
And it could be like a graph that you put a bunch of lines all over, and it's like find the numbers to open a code or something.
That is a little more advanced than we're going to do right now. That's a great idea. So one of my kids just said we could have a graph with numbers, and you got to find the graph and the numbers. And behind you, Elijah. Yeah. Unless you want to sit on a skeleton. All right. So I have the window has bars on it. So what do we do with this window after we know?
Blow it up.
What are we going to say here? So what we're doing here is we're looking at the item, and then we're going to find something in that item or with that item that will help us escape. Okay. So our first phrase says the window has bars on it.
No.
So what about the window can we notice, or what can we say to ask the person if they want to further look at the window? Break it. Do you want to break it? Well, I think that's going to come at the end.
You can see something different about the room. Different version of reflection. Or no reflection.
Can you repeat what they say, Amanda? We can't hear.
Yes, I will totally repeat when they're saying something in class. So I have the thought of there's a reflection in the window, or there's a reflection off the bars. Oh, we could just say, do you want to inspect it? There are bars on the window. Do you want to inspect it? Does that sound good?
Yes.
Yeah. I like that.
Wait, who's on Zoom?
Lots of people. Like 65.
65? Wow. I know.
All right. So the window has bars on it. Do you want to inspect it? Question mark, yes or no? If they say yes, what do they find that helps them? Yeah, Summer, we're totally going to end up using the dynamite on these bars, right? Yup. So, if they say yes, they want to inspect it, what do we do now? Well, there's bars on the windows. There's not usually a latch with bars.
When they say yes, they find a lighter.
Ooh. So somebody online just said, Michael online just said, show holes for dynamite. You find some holes or some grooves in the window. What do we think? So we've got dynamite, we find a hole. What's the next thing we're gonna find?
You're gonna find a lighter, you know, like the dynamite.
Yeah, so why don't we say you find holes that the dynamite you find holes in the window because they might not have found the dynamite yet, right?
Yeah.
They might not have looked for the dynamite first. Okay. You find holes, the right holes, in the ledge. Do we all know what a ledge is of a window?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So now again, we have searches equals searches plus 1. So originally our word searches was 0. Very, very beginning of our game. So if this is the first thing I found, searches is going to be 0 plus 1, which is 1.
1.
Right? If it's the second thing I found, searches was already 1. So it's going to be 1 plus 1.
2.
Right? Does that make sense to everybody how that variable works? All right. So that's our window. And the next thing we found that we decided was in our room was a wardrobe. Does everybody know what a wardrobe is?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like a closet that comes out from the wall, right? It's not built into the wall.
It's not going to a wall. Like
It's like a giant two-door cabinet.
Yeah, you usually keep closing it. If you are a fantasy reader, you might have read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
I have.
Yeah, right. That's a very common book for people to have read. All right, so I am changing all of my variables from bed to wardrobe. Cool. So what's our wardrobe look like?
Oh. Like brown in color, like brownish red.
Wardrobe is it huge? Is it small? Is it old?
Big rectangle.
Okay, the wardrobe is a big rectangle in brown. We good with this?
Big rectangular prism.
Ooh, oh, math points. One of my kids just said a rectangular prism, which is the 3D shape of a rectangle, isn't it? All right, we're going to use it. We're keeping it. The wardrobe is a large brown. Oh, somebody else says it smells. We can have a smelly wardrobe. Large, brown, smelly, rectangular. Spell that right? I did. I win. Prism. It's amazing, guys. Okay, so wardrobes usually have a door. So what are we going to ask the person if they want to do once they're looking at this wardrobe?
Do you want to open the door? Yes or no?
There you go. Do you want to open it? Do you want to look inside? Some of you are coming up with some great ideas for the other things. Amanda said maybe there's a box inside or clothes with pockets. Yeah. We can totally give something that's called a red herring. So a false clue, right? So maybe in the wardrobe, you find socks, right? Yeah, we have 5 minutes left. So Amanda, we're not going to add that red herring. We're going to make it just our 3-step easy one, but you could very easily add. More, right? This is our very easy, we're learning how to do it. Okay. So would you like to look inside?
Yeah.
If they say yes, you find a coat with a lighter in the pocket. Do we like it?
Yes.
There's many coats in the box.
There are many, but we're making this easy because we got 5 minutes left. We're gonna run out of time. Okay. And now we've got that searches equals searches what plus 1. So if I've gone to all 3 places and I've looked at all 3 places, I've got 1 plus 1 plus 1. What is it?
3.
3. And that 3 ends my searches, right? Repeat until searches equals 3. So if I hit 3, it won't go back into that loop. It'll bounce out and it'll go down to the end of the code. And we have if searches equals 3, you have found 3 items. Do you want to, and now I had my other 3 items. Do you want to use the lighter and the dynamite to blow open the window? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to use the lighter and the dynamite to blow open the bars, right? Yes or no? If they say yes, it worked.
You escaped solitary confinement.
You escaped the room. Congratulations.
Yay.
If they say no, I have a cheeky answer that says you were so close but are stuck in the room forever. Game over.
So are we talking about prison over here?
You were just in a dark room. That was the start of it. We ended up with bars on a window, but that's just because we were doing group share, right? All right. So Michael asks, can we search for programs like this on the Quorum website? The answer to that is not right now, but we can add a page to the Quorum website that can have updated links. Like I said, I can share this link out, right? Yeah, quick stretch break. I know we're finishing. I'm getting nagged from the big HUD honchos. The people in charge. All right, I'm gonna save this. And we're gonna save it as
Work.
Coding Symposium Escape. I'm gonna save it. The symposium activities are on the symposium website, and then you go to resources. And right now, I'm putting in the chat the link to the game we just made. Okay. Oh, it's not. Hang on. I'm going to change that. Doesn't add the www to it, which doesn't let you click it as a hyperlink. There we go. Now it should work better. So we can all play that game. But the person who asked, and I know we're going to take a little break here before the next session. The person who asked if these things exist, they don't right now, but that's a great like samples or these games that people make. They're not searchable right now, but we can add that as a feature. Okay. And I will talk to Andy and the rest of the team because they're my good friends, and we will make that happen. Okay.
There's 2 Miss Roddas.
Yes.
Wait, there is?
Yes.
Okay. Shh.
Amanda, thank you. What fun engagement with Quorum. Your students in the background, if we do this in the future, we're going to find a way to put them in the foreground and bring them to life.
It was a timing issue that I couldn't get permission slip signed in time. So.
Oh, got it. Well, you tell them thank you and appreciation to the Washington State School for the Blind and the leadership you have taken, I believe, for the last decade plus on bringing Quorum to the forefront of blind and visually impaired kids everywhere. I appreciate your connection with Stefek and what we have done to make this happen. We still have time for a stretch break, everybody. We got 3 minutes until the top of the hour. So take a moment, stand up, stretch your back, stretch your fingers, quit staring at your computer for about 3 minutes until the top of the hour. We will be joined back by Amanda as well as Gina Fugate, who did an excellent presentation in our teacher space. Reminder that all our presentations from teachers and students will be available on the APH YouTube site in due time. It takes a hot minute to get things accessible and uploaded, but they're pretty darn quick at it. So join us back at the top of the hour for the presentation led by students and their teachers on Quorum. In the meantime, if you don't want to take a break, check out the Coding Symposium website, sign up for the awards, check out the scholarship, check out the rest of the schedule for the week. See you guys in a couple minutes. I wonder if we should consider putting the direct link to the. All right, it is Wednesday afternoon. We are excited for this next student-led presentation. We have students that are participating from the Washington State School for the Blind, but they will not be on camera to my understanding, but they will be here with their perspectives and their ideas and their commentary and their experiences, and we very much appreciate that. We also have students from the Maryland School for the Blind. Here, I just found out, former member of the famous .5U Dogs Lego Robotics team. And I'm very curious to hear what they're up to in Quorum and the coding that they're taking on themselves. So thank you, Amanda Rodda and Gina Fugate, for continuing on for this next presentation by students, from yourselves as teachers, as well as including your students, to try to inspire the rest of our teachers, students, parents, everybody on our call today to consider and get their own students involved. I'm going to pass it over to the both of you to go ahead and take over this next hour.
Excellent.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Gina. We're going to let you guys go first.
Okay. So I thought we would just start with some introductions. So I would like each of you to say your first name and what is your experience with Quorum? You can.
Hello, my name is Alex, and my experiences with Quorum have been, I was on the .5U Dogs for a couple years actually in my younger years before COVID happened, and we're finishing a course based on learning coding and Quorum type things. So I'm decently experienced, no expert, but I have a little bit of experience.
And what is your favorite thing to do with Quorum that you tell me about all the time?
Either possibly try to make games or possibly break things, or both.
Yeah, I was going for the breaking things. So Alex is one of the coders who likes to see how something works, very much enjoys breaking it, taking things from different places. I think Miss Amanda might be laughing behind that mask. And he was a little humble. He's in the AP.
Would I
Computer
ever
Science.
laugh at our children? No.
He's in the AP Computer Science Principles class, which has been quite the journey. So very proud of Alex and his journey in coding and seeing where it goes. Alex, would you tell us a little bit about your vision?
So my vision, basically, I have enough vision to be very slightly useful. Like, I have light perception. I can see high contrast things relatively well. However, I can't read print because of my vision. And for accommodations, I use a screen reader known as NVDA. I can also use JAWS. I use a Braille display sometimes.
Yep, sometimes.
And, well, usually I like to listen to audiobooks, but I can read Braille. So those are just basically the things I use, and that's how my vision works somewhat.
Okay, thank you. Lyric?
I don't really have too much experience with coding, but I have done some like coding over the summer a couple times. Like in one in .com once. That was kind of interesting.
And so we did some review the intermediate exercises that Miss Rodda had composed. You especially.
So, Miss Fugate, Gina.
Yes.
Just so you know, because you were in the teacher's room last hour, most of the kids just did the escape room.
We did that yesterday.
Well, so we've done a variety.
Everybody does it a little differently, right? So
absolutely.
Honestly, that was the activity we worked through while you were hanging out with the teachers. We were escaping a room.
Okay, you might have had a really good deal there, but like I'm still running with the teachers because they got pretty excited about all the resources. So we'll see how it turns out in the end. Lyric especially had focused on the difference with loops.
Yeah.
So for any time that there's typing involved, Lyric, can you explain how you access technology?
For me, I had a tiny like a foldable micro keyboard. So it kind of helps me out because I type with one hand. So it helps me out typing on because you're doing twice as much now. So it's kind of interesting, honestly. So I'll show them that.
You could show them that if you wanted to. So one of the other small programs that they liked the most, Miss Amanda, was the one about voting. Where you could change the ages and then of course change what was in the quotation marks.
Yeah, which took forever, but okay.
Which took forever because what kept happening, Lyric?
It kept messing up.
It kept messing up.
Yeah, basically.
Was Quorum messing up?
No.
No, what was happening there?
I have a lot of experience with breaking things. I have a lot of experience with breaking things, and I know this for a fact. It's usually not Quorum, it's usually me.
Yeah, true.
There's a great student confession, but the secret is that Stefik even tells Miss Rodda and I that he makes errors and mistakes all the time. And he even introduced me to Melissa the other day, and she was teasing him about errors that were driving him a little wild, and he needed to like sit back and take a moment to figure it out, and then it turned out to be something simple. So on all of the different codes that we ran that Ms. Rodda provided, a majority of the errors involved what?
Just typing, basically.
It was
quotation.
Typing. Quotation marks were a bear if you were copying and pasting.
Yeah.
If you were typing, then what kind of errors did we run into?
Misspelling.
Misspellings.
Oftentimes.
Yeah. Do you think that would apply to other programming language?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because code has to be perfect in order for it to work. Definitely.
It does seem like it has to be perfect for it to work, but man, when it works, you all always get so excited.
Yeah,
It's a great feeling when something works. I don't get that feeling much though.
In essence, robots seem a lot easier than the online coding, but you know, Ms. Rodda is still working on me. But it's been quite the year. So that's our introduction, Ms. Rodda. I know we were just, you know, do we want to continue to do student introductions, or what's happening on your end?
Well, I have a lot of kids in the room with me, but that's because they wanted to watch the presentation. I'm looking. I actually don't have anybody who's done the projects. Oh, I do. Desmond, you did career day with me, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about what it was like to try and program?
Yeah, so when I started
Can you guys hear him? Is he close enough to the microphone?
I'm going to turn you all the way up. Can you try it again?
Okay.
When I started programming, it was like a boost of confidence to me, because like before I started coding, I was like, maybe I can't be a teacher in technology, maybe I can. And then when I actually put my thought into it, I actually got really good at it and actually succeeded and went further in technology than I ever could when I was in a normal school.
Yeah, so what Des did with us was we had a career day and we ran through the beginner lessons for Quorum, and it was a career day that was all about coding and accessibility. And so he got a one-day crash course, all-day Quorum lesson. And what he was saying was that gave him a little confidence boost because he got to see the program run. And I know him and a friend that were making that escape room made some pretty hilarious choices for where you were looking and what you found. And
a military base, a tank, and
yeah,
a few other stuff.
he was locked on an army base or something like that. So we found a tank in the room and some very interesting items in the room, which shows us that you can be creative with your programming, right? We were doing all the same steps, learning all the same loops and conditionals, but ended up with very different end products. So thanks, Des.
You're welcome.
Ms. Rodda, that also brings up a reminder of the first activity, the Mad Lib. I still feel a little guilty about Louis Braille and what we did to those sentences.
I want to know now.
Yeah, I think we see the name like.
I mean, I can pull up that project and we can do the Mad Lib.
Do it. I want to do it.
Let's go ahead and do that since you did the escape room. I haven't seen my kiddos as much because of different dynamics here at the school with state testing and whatnot, but that might be a fun thing for us to go through.
So I have on screen the Louis Braille Mad Lib. And I think we're just going to, and we learned during the last session that I cannot run JAWS and Zoom and the website at the same time. So I play human Braille or human screen reader. So it starts our code, and I am not reading this line by line, guys. It's ugly, it's nasty. We're just not doing it. So has everybody done a Mad Lib before?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. So it starts our code with a whole bunch of variables where we're asking the person for a number, a verb, a place, all those things that are the start of a Mad Lib, right?
Yes.
And then we have the code of the story, but everywhere there would be a blank, we now have the variable name, right? Because we talked about you pick up whatever's in the variable box and you stick it in place of the name. So that's how this code works. but our story is about Louis Braille. And I have heard that some people were a little upset, maybe not upset like mad, but upset like disturbed with messing with the story of Louis Braille. And I didn't think of it through that lens. So I am sorry for anybody who may have had a little bit of a gut feeling about it. But let's go ahead and run the Mad Lib. All right. And we're going to see if it runs this time, right, folks? Build successful. Oh, goodness. All right. It says it hates me. We're going to do our copy and paste trick. Make it run. I also know that they changed some stuff on my internet and other stuff yesterday, so that could be part of my issues today. Hey, it's gonna run. All right, first pop-up says, pick a number. Oh, hang on, Alex.
My number, 1,000.
1,000. What? This is going to be hilarious already. All right, a verb ending in ing.
Who?
Gina, I don't know your other student's name. I missed it.
Lyric.
Derek?
Lyric.
Lyric. Thank you. I'm sorry. Lyric, go for it.
Parachuting is my verb.
Parachuting?
Yes, because we did this a couple of days ago, Miss Rodda. That's where I developed my guilt.
Parachuting. Jumping out of a plane with a parachute. All right. Do I have any? All right. Our next question I'm going to pull from chat. So from chat, pick a place, a location.
Taco Bell?
If we don't get anybody else, I'll take yours, Bridget Dunn. Anybody on chat, a place. Colorado. All right, we'll use Colorado. Colorado. This is going to be great. Pick a name. Des, give me a name.
Miss Rodda.
Oh goodness. Oh goodness. If you've done the Mad Lib, you know that's a problem. Somebody from chat online, give me a verb. Verbs are things you do: run, jump, play, swing, swim, sleep. All right. I like it. I think Whitney also gave poop in the last class.
Yep.
All right. Alex, how about you? No, we're not going to have Alex do another number. He just did a number. How about one of my kids? Elijah, give me a number. 94. Excellent, excellent. Okay, online people, pick a time frame like days, minutes, years, weeks.
Century, millennia.
All right, I got years for micro. You know what? I like Boone's answer. Microseconds.
Oh, brilliant.
What is a microsecond? How small of a second is that?
1/1000th of a second, I believe.
1,000th of a second?
I believe so.
Excellent.
100th or 1,000th. I can't remember.
Nope, even smaller than that.
Like you're with the map.
All right. 1/1000th of a second is what somebody on chat. 1/100th of a second is what Zachary says. All right. Alex, give me a plural noun.
A pronoun?
Plural.
Sorry.
Plural noun.
Sorry. Plural. Oh. I can't talk today. I'm really, really sorry. Microphones.
Microphones. Okay. Whoops. Did I type it? I did. Great. Pick an adjective. All right, my online kids, an adjective. Adjective describes a verb. I always get that backwards. Wow, we have so many adjectives coming through. Ugly, echoing, wet, soft, intelligent. Dead. We're not doing dead. Let's go with ugly.
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 Yes.
Ugly.
We did crunchy and slimy the other day.
All right.
Yeah. I would have gone with wet and soft.
Stick. Ooh, I
but-
like that one. Stick. A plural noun.
It's a person, place, thing.
Yeah, give me one. Henry.
Burger King.
So multiple Burger Kings. All right, Burger Kings.
Yes.
Yes.
There are multiple kings of the burger.
Yep.
All right, online, past tense verb. So something you already did, you're done with. 8, love it. Ruptured. Some of you. All right, I need another one. I'll pick the next. We're gonna do ruptured.
Exploded.
Ruptured.
Exploded.
That's basically what ruptured is. Noun. A noun. Lyric, do you have a noun for me?
Yes.
Yeah, let's go robots, because why not?
Did you say?
Robots.
Robots. Perfect. I'm gonna make it singular just because I think that works better. So we're gonna say robot. And pretty close to our last one, I think. A language or a way to write.
Cursive.
Cursive. Okay.
Oh,
Almost a dead way to write, isn't it?
impressive that they do that.
A dead way to write. Nobody uses it anymore. All right. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Me. All right. Louis Braille went blind at the age of 1,000 when parachuting with tools in his father's Colorado. Miss Rodda first learned to sleep 94 microseconds old. His first microphones were made of ugly paper with letters embossed into the Burger Kings. When Louis was 15, he took a new way to read that he ate from an army chaplain and ruptured it to become the robot we know as cursive. And then under that, we get the printout of now. Here's the real story of Louis Braille. Louis Braille went blind at the age of 3 while playing with tools in his father's workshop. Louis first learned to read when he was 10 years old. His first books were made of waxy paper with letters embossed into the pages. When Louis was 15, he took a new way to read from what he learned from an army chaplain and improved it to become the dots we know as Braille. So, good job, folks. Good job.
I'm trying so hard not to die laughing.
It does make 0 sense in the chat. That's what we have. That's what a Mad Lib is supposed to be.
You know, Louis was a teenager when he created Braille. I think he would have an appreciation for Mad Libs.
Yeah, right? I think Louis would approve of parachuting and rupturing the language. I think it's great. We're great.
How do you rupture a language? It sounds painful for everybody involved.
Well, when you break your code, that's probably what it feels like to the server.
That's fair.
That's very fair.
That's fair.
And Miss Rodda can't learn how to sleep.
I did learn to sleep, but not when I was 94 microseconds old, I'm pretty sure.
Wait, how'd you
learn to sleep?
All right. So again, that's some of the fun things we can do with coding, right? All right, 1 second here. All right.
So we want to be sure, first of all, thanks guys. That was really great. Love the Mad Lib. Did a lot of those with my son, so I can appreciate them as well. I do want to make sure that the folks in the audience know that this is your time to ask
Okay, I think
questions.
it's a break or question time. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ask questions. Teachers, students, everyone's welcome to put your question up in the chat, and you can ask a student directly, or you can ask Miss Gina or Miss Amanda or Miss Rodda, sorry.
So many different names this year, it's fine.
Feel free to type in your questions. Are you maybe able to raise your hand? I'm not sure. I'd have to refer to Leanne on that one and ask it out loud. Okay.
So
there is one question.
Go for it.
To the students. It says, what did you find the hardest part of getting started?
I think that
yeah.
would be your kids who have a little more background there, Gina, than mine sitting here.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, you want to go first?
Getting started for me was just sort of a challenge of figuring out how best to not break things. I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
I think so. If we focus on this year and Alex being in the AP Computer Science Principles class, when we started to play with the widgets, Alex, do you remember your first experience running that program and what you did?
I vaguely, it's been a while. I'm going to try to remember it. So basically, I ran the program after we walked through some of it, and I felt like I was on top of the world when I first figured out that this gibberish, basically at that time, this gibberish to me was actually doing something and actually running on your computer to produce lesson 1, app 1 of the widgets, which was a water conservation tips app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so great memory, because that seems like it was forever ago. You know, the other thing about that is I believe you were in shock because when it loaded and you could actually access that with NVDA, it was accessible, including the image, having the alt tag and everything else. So it's easy for people who do not have to have accessibility support to forget what it's like if you go on to an hour of code and it's not accessible. But with APCSP and the work that Stefek's team has done, everything is accessible in APCSP. So Alex, you were delighted. You were so happy. You got pretty loud and you were cheering on Stefek. And I told him later that I wish I would have had a video of that. Lyric, it's been a while since you were involved with like Lego robotics. And you did do the Mad Lib and some other stuff a couple of days ago and whatnot. But why do you think like it was important for you to have that robotics experience? Like what made it worth it to you?
What made it worth it to me is the fact that yes, I want to go into cybersecurity when I graduate from here. So it'll be like learning how to code different things and like knowing how to make sure you don't break anything, basically.
And had you had any coding experience prior to coming to MSB?
No, not really.
And that's honestly what we find a lot when students transfer to MSB is that things have either happened so quickly and are usually completely inaccessible that we're lucky if they were able to pick up on CS Unplugged activities and just coding concepts, but to have that hands-on coding experience is what Quorum really provides. So I hope that answers the questions.
Great.
It's very different than the big snake.
What big snake? I'm like, what are you talking about?
The big snake that is known as Python, the other coding language.
Oh. I don't like.
We'll be talking about that tomorrow.
Yeah, snakes are tomorrow, but it's actually a reference to Monty Python I read somewhere. So like, I'm trying to step away from the snake.
Love snakes.
All right. Michael has 2 questions. He wants to know, how long does it take to finish all computer science concepts in Quorum? And then he also wants to know, how long after using Quorum can you switch to other languages?
So there are a couple different tracks of classes on the Quorum website. We've been working as a curriculum committee on updating the core track to make it a little more interesting and a little more fleshed out. And that takes about a semester. And that, if you do a lesson every day throughout the school year, right? It's about a semester. And that'll get you through the basics of programming. It gets you all the way through, you know, all of our variables and loops and conditionals that we just did. And those are like hour of code stuff, right? But it gets you into actions and returns and your classes and really fleshed out full programs. It takes about a semester.
And I think the second part of that, did that answer the second part?
Oh, how long does it take after to switch to another language? Whenever you want, dude. Whenever you want.
I would jump in there and say that, you know, you can dabble in other languages, especially when you're starting out with that introductory stuff. You know, our favorite is loops because the kids like to change it from like 3 to 33 to 300 to 3000, you know, try to crash the server.
Yeah.
But go and compare what it's like to write a loop in Python and look at Java. You know, we have done that as we've looked at any alternatives for Lego, for example, but Quorum makes a whole lot of sense when you start comparing it to other languages. At the same time, we actually are pretty pleasantly surprised often when we start to look at other language and we're just like, hey, we understand that. But we also understand what Stefik says a lot about, like, hey, there's no reason behind that semicolon over there. And there's no real reason behind FOR. It's just part of the Java.
Thank you. Another question from Summer. And Summer, you may have to elaborate on this. Your question is, on the East Coast, what school has the best computer science course? I think you're talking about a college level. Is that correct, Summer? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Feel free to drop it in the chat. Let's see.
I would say that the East Coast has been called the Digital Harbor. So that was news to me when I moved here from Kentucky, you know, because of all the different government agencies and the demand for cybersecurity. Baltimore and Washington, D.C. area are really heavy with the needs. There are a lot of programs and I really couldn't just pick one. I will say that UMBC in Maryland definitely has a strong reputation and supports First Lego League and has multiple programs, but there's all sorts of great programs out there. So congratulations, you got to do some research.
All right. Zachary has a question for Alex.
Yeah.
Alex, what motivated you to learn how things tick? Your motivation to break things?
This is going to be interesting. So just in general in life, sorry, I broke my voice box with an unrelated incident earlier. Earlier in life, and throughout my life, I've always just sort of wondered how things tick, and, you know, breaking things can be highly amusing. For coding, I was signed up for the course and just, it spiraled from there. I just sort of have a natural curiosity to know how something ticks and how to break it and how to fix it.
To the point where I actually promised Alex I would let him dissect at least one computer before the school's end.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Alex. Travis has a student with him that wants to know if Quorum is something that you all see yourself using after high school. Any of the students out there see themselves using it after high school?
Can't even see past tomorrow. I'm sorry.
I could probably see myself doing it.
And any of your students going to be using it, you think, after high school?
Well, I had one just say yes, but you know, that's a thing. I do know a couple of my students from last year who graduated and moved on in the last few years are using it again because of the 3D game design that's now accessible to them. So they're not doing it for, you know, big business or Apple or anybody like that. They're doing it for themselves. So they can really learn some of those concepts of like 3D space and that kind of thing.
Derek Smith mentions we have many adults who use Quorum, so maybe he can elaborate on that and let us know more about the adults who are using Quorum. Karina wants to know, what is the most challenging about programming applications? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Alex.
Alex.
So for me, this may be different for other people. For me, the most challenging part of programming an application is when you have that error, like that incessant error that no matter what you do will not go away. And the most challenging part is both fixing it and not banging your head through the nearest window when it breaks for the millionth time.
One of the funniest things about coding, at least for this year, was because of those widgets, Alex was among the students who could go and get snippets of code and then use them himself. It wasn't necessarily the strength of all of our students to keep track of what they were getting and where they were putting it. So sometimes we'd have to redirect, and I would give just embossed hard copy Braille to try to get them to slow down and not get ahead of themselves, because one error can turn into 10. So that's where I really enjoyed the story from Stefek, where like even he has to sit back. But that's, you know, the coding experience.
Yep. All right, let's see. There's another question here from William. Gen Cyber for the blind and visually impaired. Oh, this is a comment, just reading it out to folks. Gen Cyber for the blind and visually impaired is taking applications for their cybersecurity camp. So make a note of that. Let's see, JJ asked, can you create a project in Quorum and run it in Windows? And Stefik answered, yes, you can. Quorum Studio, for example, was written in Quorum and runs on Windows. So thank you, Stefik, for answering that. Oh, yes, Alex.
Quick comment. I never quite understood how a programming language can be written and updated in itself. That like, it sounds like some sort of paradox or time loop or something that really breaks everything, including your brain.
I think we would default to Stefek.
You and me both, Alex. Maybe I'll understand that after my doctorate degree. I don't know.
I know, back it up before you break it so that you can like go back to the original. So what applies in robotics might actually even apply to like life in general, Alex.
All right, another question from Chris. I have heard of, I think he means Scrum and Agile method. When you work as part of a team, how does one who is blind work and review code written by sighted users?
Alex, you have any thoughts on that? Because you've done it.
I have, so our teachers have written code for us to review. And for me, who really can't see that much, it is very much the same as reviewing code from a blind user when you're reviewing it from a sighted user. It, in Quorum, seems exactly the same to me, except maybe sighted users worry a little more about indenting code, whereas I personally just it's useful, but I don't see a huge amount of use for it. And if it's not done, I won't go out of my way to fix it.
So when you've also shared code back and forth with other students, how have you done it?
Well, I put it in a Google Doc because that is pretty convenient. And then I share the Google Doc with the other students and usually Miss Gina and Miss Rodda. There's some Quorum and Google glitches or bugs that break quotation marks. So
the WordPad is used to try to avoid glitches sometimes. There's something called GitHub that can be used, but for the most part, it's like everything else. They just have to have the tech, and the tech has to have an accessible means through Google App or Notepad, something like that. I will say one of the biggest differences that I've noticed this year is for visual users, whether it's the online IDE or in Quorum Studio, visual users do get feedback with coloring. So things will turn blue or purple, and that is not yet accessible with the screen reader, even if you have color on. So that's one of those bugs that we report to Stefik and ask for things to be fixed. Visual.
He said it's on my list to fix.
I know, we keep him busy, and he's very gracious about that. The visual cursor also for students with low vision can be really difficult sometimes, and sort of like a light gray print. But that's also where you need to be able to use your tools and maybe start to think about, hey, would it help me to use a screen reader and not be straining all the time? Because we know that the world isn't fully accessible. So we have to strike a balance, and that's not going to stop these kids from pursuing coding, whether it's recreational or as a career.
Yes, Alex.
I kind of want to thank all the people who took time to watch us and watch this symposium, this entire group presenting and talking about their experiences. And I want to thank Mr. Stefik for creating Quorum in the first place, because without him and his efforts with Quorum, it would be a very different world for people like me and my classmates who might have problems seeing.
That's fantastic. We still have some time left. If anyone, speaking of experiences, if anyone has any students that worked on any of the activities prior to Symposium and want to share their experiences, you're welcome to do so at this time. We'd love to hear from you. Andy says, no problem at all. I assume that's to you, Alex. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? There was some talk about GitHub and using the command line in GitHub works well with sharing code. But also, Michael likes the Google Docs idea. Amanda mentioned that they had issues with school firewalls in Git, so that's why they defaulted to Google Docs. So that's good to know. Chris wants to know, does Quorum have a formatting code feature? I'm not sure.
Stefik answered that right under
okay.
No, but we're working on it.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks for catching that.
There was another one about simple sounds from Michael for errors in Quorum. There used to be, if you had a compiler error, it would buzz at you when you scrolled down the screen. I would like to see that back, so that will be requested. It's very helpful because visually you get a little red squiggle, but the non-visual user doesn't get anything anymore, and I'm not sure where that went. So yeah, totally.
And he said he had to run to a meeting, but he thanks all the panelists today as well. So we have about 15 minutes left. Oh, here's another one. Karina, I posed this question at the beginning, but it wasn't caught. Would Quorum eventually create coding for math content and online homework platforms?
I saw that question, Karina, and I don't think I understand what we would do. Like, why would we make coding for that platform? Is it not already accessible? Because like Wolfram is accessible. So I don't understand why Quorum would do that.
She says make math palettes and graphing descriptions.
Yeah, so that's what, now that Andy and the team have cracked the data, so thing we can add that to a request list, and Gina and I are part of the curriculum committee and part of the hey Andy, do this for teachers committee. So I will add that to our list. That's great.
And we'll give a reminder. I don't know if you had a chance to talk about that because you were talking to the students before, Amanda, but EPIC in June is focused on data science. So that is the release. If you want to attend that and check it out, hang out with Stefek's team, it's all virtual. I look forward to the day that we'll be together, but I showed the picture of 2018 when we were in Texas, Amanda, doing the computer gang symbol, as they called it. So it's a laid back group. I just crossed my arms and made a C with both hands. That was how I was introduced to Stefek's team. Camp. Yep. So it's a really laid back and friendly group, but they welcome people to come and bring ideas and experience it. And that's what EPIC does, is basically like use us in order to break things, as Alex would say, so that Stefek has more things to do on his to-do list. And then usually by August or September, they'll do another release.
Yeah.
There's, I think, another question in here from Michael. I'm not sure if they're responding to each other in chat or not, but it says, can you make Quorum interpreted language like Python? Because you can run code while you write it. Maybe it was supposed to be you can make, or I'm not sure. Can you make Quorum interpreted language like Python?
So if I'm reading it right, Michael, and if this is completely off base, shoot another question or clarification. You can write plugins so that your Quorum program can read Python or Java or whatever else you want it to read into and access another language that way. I've never done it. I haven't tackled that next step in my coding adventures, but you can write plugins that will access other languages and then be able to use them.
That would be a great question for the Google group. So that Denise has that link, I think, that you could add somewhere we had talked about. So if you have permission from your families, talking to students, then there is a Google forum basically through Google Listserv, and a lot of people will pop those questions out, and they get support from the whole Quorum community, which is actually international. Stefik and William that were on here earlier are also great supports on there, as well as many other parts of the Quorum team.
Okay. I don't have that Google link handy at the moment. I'm not sure where I have it. So if someone else does and want to pop it in the chat, feel free to do so.
Okay, Michael, I understand you now. So on the Quorum website, there are online IDEs. You can write short bits of code and test them there, but we don't have a separate interpreter. Like, I now understand what you mean. Either in Quorum Studio or on the online IDE are the two places to test your code. Patrick, you're 58 and you want to learn how to code. Pick a website. Pick a class, start doing it. If you're interested in Quorum, go to quorumlanguage.com and pick Underlearn, one of the tracks, and start playing.
I think our resources on our website on the National Coding Symposium is a great place to start. As talked about in this last panel, we you got to find that code that speaks to you. And so check out Quorum, check out Python, check out HTML, check out CodeQuest, CodeJumper. See if one of those CodeJumper might be a little bit difficult to get your hands on, Patrick, not being a student, but check out Python, HTML, and Quorum, and they're all simple activities that you can kind of get your hands on over the course of a day or two, and see from there which one strikes you to go further with. You have another recommendation for w3schools.org in the chat. That's another good resource.
Started using those to try to learn Python, but then life got in the way, so I haven't finished those yet.
Life always gets in the way, sir. It's about finding avenues around it.
Yeah,
you are correct.
It's true.
Why I haven't learned how to write plugins yet.
We might dabble in Python tomorrow, as long as I think Monty.
I will remind you. I will remind you that you said we might dabble in Python tomorrow, Miss Gina. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you, Al.
Amanda wants to know, can we have the link for the resources links and link for cybersecurity for adults? I can put the resources links in. Which is APH Connect Center.org/coding/resources. And that is in the chat.
I think we might.
The cybersecurity adults, did they put the link in earlier? I guess they did not.
Gen Cyber. Go ahead and put the link in for that. I think we have, well, we do have a couple more minutes. We can also wrap things up if there are no other questions.
Looks like there's one from Karina.
Coming in.
What web browsers are useful when dealing with Quorum, or is it a single application?
So it's both. You can,
Okay.
oh, I am gonna
Alex.
let Alex answer. I'm sorry, Alex, go for it, man. I didn't see your hand, go for it.
Well, personally, in my daily coding and just life computer adventures, whether that be me trying to play audio games or me just trying to do Quorum for school or class or whatever the case may be, I use Chrome. Whether Chrome is a good browser for this, I am not sure because I have not tested alternatives. However, if I'm doing Quorum coding, I like using Quorum Studio because it's just there. It's relatively simple to get around and use, and just it does like to crash on me, but then again, so does Chrome. So
I think that was a great question. Thanks, Karina. There's also one here that kind of opens a larger can of worms, but Michael wants to know, what resources can I tap into when I write code and cannot find the answer online?
I just put that Program LVI programmers discussion list in there. It's a great space to connect with other blind and visually impaired programmers of all walks of programming and languages, and to be able to post out saying just that, like struggling here, been searching, been Googling, tried myself as my first resource and still can't find the answer. Anybody have recommendations or resources? It's a chat messenger service from called Program L. I put the link in there. It's a freelist.org group.
I will go check that out when I get out of school and like.
Now we're talking.
Not that you're counting your minutes.
No,
I think we're gonna wrap it up, you guys. We have the closing code posted in the chat. The closing code is accessible. ACCESSIBLE. The closing code is accessible. Thank you all for joining us today. Another fantastic moment in the Coding Symposium. Thank you, Maryland School for the Blind. Thank you, Washington State School for the Blind. Teachers and students alike, you guys are leading this space. It takes a lot of courage to put this type of leaderships on your back, students, and to be present representing your school and yourselves to people from all over the world and our country. And I'd be very proud of myself if I were you.
Put it on your resume.
Put it on your resume. This is the stuff we trust that you will lead our world, whether you end up in the technology field or otherwise. Looking forward to hearing from you down the line. Thank you.
And you'll make it accessible.
Also, a reminder to check out the awards page on the website. We have several different awards available, both from APH, Humanware, Vispero, and a contest from Fox Family Foundation, who is one of the sponsors of the National Coding Symposium. And thanks to everyone who participated today. Adrian, if you have any closing remarks, or Leanne, that's all from me.
I think we're good to go. Join us tomorrow for a whole bunch on Python. We're gonna dive deep into Python. It's not as scary as people have made it out to be. We've got some wonderful resources to simplify it there as well. And then Friday, we continue with a real look into discussions with coders and programmers themselves, and a look and peek into that learning all this coding doesn't necessarily land you as being a programmer yourself. There's a lot of career paths that open up in learning coding.